Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. We're live now, so we can start. Welcome, everyone, to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of May 3rd. I'm Alison Nicholson, the chair today, and I would like to acknowledge that we are on the Quw'utsun and Nuu-chah-nulth people's traditional territory, and we are very grateful for their stewardship of the land and their teachings, and I always hope that we can bring their teachings to our important land use decisions today, because we're really making decisions that will impact the community far into the future. I'd also like to add, before we start to do the approval of the agenda, that next time, we got a really packed agenda today, but next time I'm hoping that we can do a bit of a roundtable, because I would like to check in on how I'm doing and whether there are issues or things that we can improve. So we will do that next time. Okay. And if I could have a motion to approve the agenda, unless there are any additions? I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Corporate Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes, and we have 2 minutes for adoption today. The first is the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of April 19th, and those are to be adopted.
All right, do I have a motion? Any omissions or changes? I have a motion and a seconder. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next is the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting minutes of April 19th, 2023, to be adopted.
Motion has been moved, seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no business arising from the minutes, and then we next have public input period.
Great, so now it's time for public input period. I think that we have about 10 people, so before we started, we usually only have 15 minutes, but that will take more than 15 minutes, so let's have a motion to extend it for another 15, and seconded, and all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. So we'll have a 30-minute public input period. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone. We're going to time it because we need to keep this really right on. So you have 3 minutes, and at 30 seconds before your time's up, the light will go from green to yellow, and then it will go to red when I would like you to sit down. So I hope, but welcome. We really appreciate you coming to provide us your input. The microphone button should be red and speak right into it. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us all here, and good afternoon to all of you.
And please state your name.
I will do that. My name is June Ross, and I'm the chairperson of Vancouver Island Water Watch Coalition, and I gave you a copy of my little speech here. I'm here today to say to you that the citizens of Area H and all of Vancouver Island Water Watch Coalition, and we have 13 groups so that you're aware of that, are in complete horror and opposition to the process that the CVRD has put in place to deal with Schnitzer Steel and their heavy industrial use of land that was always intended to be light industrial land. This land sits on top of the Cassidy Aquifer. This is a precious piece of underground water that provides drinking water, agricultural water, and water to businesses. The aquifer has also been designated as highly vulnerable to contamination. We ask then, why would you be considering a covenant? There are huge problems with the direction you seem to be hell-bent on taking, and we ask that you reconsider this process you have put into place. In June of 2011, Kate Miller and 2 others prepared a document entitled A Guide to the Use of Intrinsic Aquifer Vulnerability Mapping. On page 17 of the document, I have put down a quote for you. I'm not going to read it all, it takes time. This can be achieved in a number of ways, including moving development with a high hazard threat, and it gives a couple of examples. Among them is not a steel industry, away from areas of high vulnerability. And we say that that is what you should be doing, is moving them. In our opinion, there are many questions you should be asking yourselves and staff. Amongst these questions are, how does the covenant protect the aquifer? How does the covenant protect the drinking water for the citizens of Area H? What are the timelines for each of the protections you have put into place in the covenant? There are none indicated within the covenant. Who will monitor the implementation of the covenant and then the day-to-day operation of Schnitzer Steel? How many bylaw officers does the CVRD have? How many are trained to take on the tasks associated with the covenant? And I say I'm running out of time. Schnitzer does not belong on top of the aquifer. It absolutely does not belong there. They can move out to Duke Point, which is zoned industrial land, clean up the mess they have made in their present location, and lead.
Ms. Ross,
Yes,
you're out of
I
time.
know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yep, they've all got copies.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Pauline Hunt, and I've lived in the Yellow Point region of Area H, the unceded territory of the Stamanis First Nations, for 40-plus years. And I've spent 6 years as an APC board member, 10 years as a volunteer food bank worker, and currently I work as president of the No-Draw North Oyster Diamond Ratepayers Association. First of all, I want to thank all of the area directors for taking on the difficult and sometimes thankless, stressful role of working as our CVRD area directors. I do appreciate your work. Area H is a major, excuse me, I'm breathless. Area H is a major farming, forested rural community. It's the green space between 2 urban centers, Nanaimo and Ladysmith. Area H has a major absence of freshwater resources. The Yellow Point aquifer is a misnomer. It is not actually an aquifer at all. In the traditional sense, it is in fact the bedrock of Vancouver Island, with a few cracks for eking out a negligible amount of fresh water for our wells. Climate change and record-breaking droughts are also having a negative impact on water sustainability. In recent years, many residents have had to install cisterns. We have a couple of inadequate streams and very shallow man-made lake pretty much constitute the total of our water assets. Therefore, the Cassidy Aquifer is a highly valuable potential future water supply. The federal government has installed a dedicated wellhead on the aquifer for our Chemainus First Nations people as a future water supply. I think it's critical that we conserve this aquifer now for future generations, people, not heavy industrial corporations. My concern with approving the Schnitzer Covenant, one, the attached Vancouver Island groundwater assessment and vulnerability study map identifies the entire Cassidy Aquifer area, CVRD and RDN, as being highly vulnerable to groundwater contamination. Why then is the CVRD permitting an industrial zone upon this highly vulnerable aquifer? This will allow Schnitzer to expand. 2, industrial zoning sets a precedent in Area H and invites more industrial developments to locate here. 3, the wellhead for our North Oysters Public School and Community Center is sourced to the Cassidy Aquifer and is situated next to the Blueberry Farm in close proximity to Schnitzer Steel. How do we guarantee this water supply will be protected from contamination if Schnitzer is allowed to expand?
Ms. Hunt, you're out of time.
One more sentence. 4, if regional districts have no lawful responsibility to enforce bylaws, how do we guarantee Schnitzer will comply with the mandates set forth in the covenant? Water is life, and it should belong to the people first. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Members of the board and ESA committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon.
Could you state your name, please?
Sorry?
Could you state your name?
Oh, Mike Fall, sorry.
Thank you.
In 2017, the Area H Advisory Planning Commission was asked to review this rezoning application. And after extensive research, recommended to the CVRD board, the application be denied unless ironclad, state-of-the-art aquifer protection be guaranteed. And that was listed in the APC minutes as not negotiable. But with all due respect to the people that have drafted this covenant, I do not believe the proposed covenant measures up to that standard. And I do not believe the CVRD has the ability to adequately enforce its conditions. I think the CVRD struggles to enforce our existing bylaws. Add to that, most CVRD bylaws enforcement is complaint-driven, and the Schnitzer yard is closed to the public. So who is going to see an infraction and complain? Nobody, certainly not the employees. Additionally, the inspections required to confirm compliance to the conditions of the covenant must be done by professionals that are employed by the appropriate provincial ministry, Health, Ministry of Environment, Lands, etc. And I believe the lower reaches of Walker Creek, Thomas Creek, and Bush Creek still support small populations of salmon and trout, all downstream from this operation, so perhaps DFO should be involved as well. Regional governments are just not set up to conduct the level of compliance and enforcement required for this industry. Also, based on their track record, I do not believe the current tenant of this property can be trusted to do any of the monitoring and/or testing that will be required. Finally, it would seem logical to me that the south half of the Cassidy Aquifer empties into the Ladysmith Harbor. So this proposal, enabling the auto salvage operation to continue, should be of great concern to our First Nations community who have a shellfish culture and harvest operation in the bay. They also access the Cassidy Aquifer for their drinking water, again, all downstream from this polluting facility. Have they been informed or invited to partake in this discussion? We need our elected officials to step up to the plate and put an end to this merry-go-round, just like Sonia Furstenau and the board did for the Shawnigan Lake water supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not used to using one of
It's
these
all set
things.
up. Go
It's
ahead.
okay. My name is Miff Plekas, and I live on Jones Road in Area H. I think I've just had about an hour to get ready here because I just happened to see it online. And I have to tell you, I phoned to the CVRD, and I went through 4 people to try and talk to them. Couldn't get anybody. Then I phoned for the manager, couldn't talk to him. And then finally I said, okay, give me Aaron or give me Ben. Well, I guess Ben was the one who got the message from me because I'm not very happy what's going on here in the CVRD. Not just this problem, but other problems because we live on that side and we don't get any recognition, barely. I've listened to these people talking now and I support it all, but I don't understand why the regional board is even entertaining to put this into industrial. I've been around, one lady said, she's seen me for 30 years here, so I guess I've been longer than that. I'm talking about schnitzers, back to when Jack Davis had it and when Howie Davis had it, and the regional board. And I'm sorry, the regional board has not done their job. The regional board doesn't have enough people. Schnitzer or anybody else are just going ahead doing what they choose, and they won't do anything unless somebody is sitting on them. I go by the other day to Nanaimo. Now there's another lot on the highway, and I'm seeing schnitzers with all these trucks that are all sitting in this lot. What is that zone for? Is that going to become a part of schnitzers? I don't know how many people here have been to see schnitzers with their operation, but I think you need to do it if you haven't been there. You should have, as far as I'm concerned, you should have had this in the paper, in the Chronicle. I shouldn't have to look online at 11 o'clock in the morning and have to say, oh God, I got to get down there because they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. You should have had it on the paper. You should be having it out for people in the area to know what's going on. This is a very important issue. It's been going on for at least 40 years or more. And what are you going to do about it? I think you should look at it, and I think you should all say no to it. And if my people that I live in Area H, like Ben and Aaron, are going to support this, then we better get rid of them.
Thank you, Ms. Plekas. Anyone else? Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Ione Brown. I'm here today to talk about the property in question. I am a professional forester. Can you hear me okay on that? Is that
A little bit
all right?
closer to the mic,
Oh,
maybe.
okay, sure. I am a professional forester with many years of experience, during which time I have managed several environmental management system programs and have a thorough understanding of environmental legislation. Being fairly new to this area, I do not have an extensive history in my knowledge about Schnitzer or the land, but I do understand industry, and I understand the enormous implications of having heavy industry sitting on top of the Cassidy Aquifer. I also understand that adding a covenant to the property to include legislative requirements is neither appropriate nor suitable. The requirements should be managed through environmental regulations, waste discharge permits, updated waste discharge permits, not the ones that were issued initially, and governed by the province where the qualified professionals reside to manage, inspect, and ensure compliance with the regulations. The key today, though, is whether or not District Lot 9 should be rezoned to permit the scale and scope of current automotive and scrap metal recycling operations so the use could become legal and conforming. That is your question today. It is both my professional and my personal opinion, and I would not say that lightly, that changing the zoning here is not the right path, nor is it the right use of this land. Directors, please do not approve this change of zoning and work with the people in the community to preserve the water quality of the aquifer. I'm not asking the question, but suggesting if you haven't done so, you should be consulting with the Shtoumanis First Nation on this as well. Mike mentioned the same thing, but about these proposed changes as it does affect everybody in the region. At the very least, the province should be enacting special legislation for this site for any industrial works over or near drinking water and over the aquifer that covers every amount of hazardous waste. The problem with the hazardous waste regulation is that it only governs hazardous waste if it is above a certain volume or weight. Much of the material in the Schnitzer plant seems to be just magically below the amount that is governed and is under the hazardous waste amount. So for over the aquifer, the spill containment legislation does not allow for spills of any amount in drinking water or fish habitat, and legislation for this property should contain different classifications for hazardous waste, in my opinion. How do we know what has been spilled through the gravel into the aquifer over the years? Do you know, for instance, that it's only 100 milliliters of brake fluid, which would be required to be a lethal dose? And there is 1 liter in each car that goes onto that site, approximately. Even if this facility was fully compliant, and it obviously is not, the location for this type of business owned by anyone is not appropriate in any way. Would you be opening the door to other heavy industry in the area? Setting a precedent is troubling. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. You know, excuse me, everyone. It's really important that we don't provide feedback to the speakers because if you happen to be on someone who was in the opposing side, it might make you feel uncomfortable and not safe to come up and speak. So I think it's really important that we just are neutral and listen to people. Anyone else?
I sent a letter in already. My name's Dorothy Farr. I'm a neighbor and resident to Schnitzer Steels. So there's one farm property between my property and theirs, and I would be the person who would phone, as Mike said. I can see what goes on there, and it's horrific. And I do think that the public should be more aware and that these things should be brought to attention a lot sooner. I didn't find out about this until a couple of days before it as well, and the only reason I was notified of it is because somebody else was watching and let me know. But I looked 2 weeks ago for what was going to be happening during this meeting, and there was nothing on the agenda yet. So I agree that this is failing, the system is failing. I've spent most of my life volunteering and helping out the underdogs. I've looked after handicapped children and disabled people. I've volunteered throughout the school system. I've been the PAC chairperson. I've done everything I can to help support my community. And I have expectations of the people that I vote for. And I appreciate how hard you all work, but I question now, is it the staff that's driving the decisions, or is it the board that's driving the decisions? Because, Mike Tippett, your name is on everything, and it seems like you're really pushing for this to happen. And
Point of order.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm over? Not allowed to do that?
let's not attribute
Okay.
anything to.
Okay,
We really appreciate our staff. They work really
do too.
hard and they're very objective and provide good advice.
I have to question it. I'm just saying I question it because there's a noise bylaw that was signed by the manager that says it can have 90 decibels. If you live next door to 90 decibels from 6 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, I tell you, you don't want to live there. And that's been approved. This is what's been told is okay. So if this is going to continue, the birds, the animals, like we have animals, it's traumatizing. I raised my child from 10 months old on this property. The windows would shake. We had to change all of our windows because Schnitzer's is so loud. Our child couldn't go to bed at night. I phoned every single night at 7:30. Can you please shut down? My child is trying to go to sleep. They would laugh at me and not do anything. I phoned the CVRD. Nothing gets done. We can't, I got phoned back by staff, and I'm told, we cannot enforce our bylaws. So what is going to change? Are the bylaws ever going to be enforced? Because in the last 10 years that I've lived there, they have not been at all. So I'm sorry, I do lose faith because I live next door to this. I've lived through the fire, which was also traumatizing, very traumatizing for us living there. And we've been through the flood for November 2021. And we watched the sludge pond fill into the farm next to us, heading toward our house. My back well is already contaminated. How long until it goes the extra 100 feet and gets to my house drinking water? We don't drink our water. We haven't been drinking our water for years now. It's not right. We bought a house because it had the best water around.
Thank
So-
you. Anyone else?
Don't touch. Yeah,
Welcome.
good afternoon. My name is Murray McNabb, live on Yellow Point Road, came down. And if there had been maybe 9 more votes for me, I'd be sitting amongst you. But first off, I've been around there for quite a long time. In about 1965, when I was 8 years old, I pulled my dad's truck down to the property that Schnitzer's currently occupied to get it repaired. It was a small repair shop, not so much anymore. I've known all of the directors for Area H since the very first one. It happens that the son, the good old boy, or one of the directors, or the fellow that bought Schnitzer's or was operating there, was the son of the second director, good old boy, and there wasn't too much done about it. So then, what's happened is usually when I've talked to these past directors, they said that they usually vote along the lines of what the area director decides for something like this. I would hope that the Right Honorable BM has spoken to all of the other directors and expressed his concern. This did not happen for the salary increase or the regional recreation debacle. Now, I know a little bit about water, as I've drilled over 500 water wells, both in British Columbia and in New South Wales, Australia. I've driven across the Nullarbor Plain, and I know how precious it is. So this resource there should have been tapped in back when the Woodley Ridge development went ahead. One of the town hall meetings, an ex-CVRD employee was trotted out. I don't know whether he came on his own or got a free coffee, what brought him there, but he knew at the time when Woodley Ridge was approved that there wasn't enough water there. Well, how did the CVRD approve it? For that development, there should have been at least a $20 million bond put up by the developers to ensure that when the water ran out, they could take care of it. This is much like Schnitzer's operation. Schnitzer should be made to put up at least a $200 million bond to ensure that when the water, if and when the water is contaminated, the people that rely on that water can be compensated, bring a pipeline in from somewhere else. So I'd urge all of you directors to please use some common sense. This is people's water supply. We have a great rally down here to save the Cowichan River watershed. Well, how about saving our watershed? Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Anyone else?
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Paul Pattison, and I'm here in support of agenda item R1, a proposed new post-secondary animation school.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I tried to tell you.
Okay.
This is the applicant for R1? So you'll get a chance when you're...
If you're the applicant, yeah, you will have a
You'll get to talk when your
Okay.
application comes up.
I don't know if I am the applicant.
Well, you're part of it. You're together. You can still talk then.
Yeah, yes, if you're associated with the applicant, then when the application comes up, then you'll have an opportunity to speak then. So is there anyone else that would like to provide public input on any of the agenda items today?
Can I finish off?
Just There was someone at the back who hasn't spoken yet.
I just want to...
Excuse me, this lady is next. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Baker, and yes, I've lived in the area for a long time, but we won't say how long. I also was just aware of this, honestly, about an hour ago, so it was pretty quick. So I haven't prepared anything, and I apologize. I need to do some research on this. However, I believe it was Ione Brown mentioned, and I truly believe this is where we're at. I'm puzzled, as a scientist, I'm puzzled why we're at this level making the decision on the environment. This is big, and all due respect, I don't know everybody's background by any stretch of the imagination, but I truly believe we need to get this back to the Ministry of Environment, perhaps water quality, I don't know, with the people that have the expertise to deal with this. We need the numbers. It's common sense not to have heavy industrial on a water system. I've dealt with fish, I've dealt with wildlife. We wouldn't do that. We need to get this back to a higher level, to the provincial level. I don't know why we're at this level. I'm very puzzled that we're trying to make these big decisions at a very, very local level. So I have nothing really more to say other than I'm against it. Next time we meet, hopefully we don't have to meet again, but if we do end up going to public hearing, I will be much more prepared. I will have done my research, and I apologize for not being prepared, but I got a shower in, so I feel like I made it. So, thank you.
Thank you. How many minutes do we have left in public input period? 2 more speakers?
I would just...
I can do 2 more speakers. I have to give preference to people who have not spoken yet.
I'm not speaking anything about anything. I'm just speaking to the fact that these people, you take a note of all the people that speak, and then that's how you come to your conclusion. It doesn't matter if those people sit there and they don't stand up and say, we're opposed to this. It's never recorded. Is that correct?
They're not on public input, no.
It's not recorded, is it? So all these people who are not speaking...
We can see them.
You can see it, but it's not on record that these people have been opposed to it. You don't know that because they haven't stood up and said they're opposed to it. Is that correct?
We don't know if they're opposed or if they are
That's
in
correct.
favor of it.
That's correct. So what I'm saying, if these people stand up, at least say, I'm opposed to this, my name is, then you can record it. And then there will be a recording of all the people who hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. But
I would like to say that everyone has an opportunity before our meetings to send in their comments if they are, and so we have a written record of it. So there's time for. Yes, you can. Yes, you can send it afterwards because the decisions always get ratified at the board a week from now. Oh, unless it stops here. Does it stop? This one stop here? Yeah. Anyway, don't confuse. Thanks, Sierra, but. You're confusing me. We have time for 2 more speakers. Mr. Evans, please carry on.
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans, and by the way, this is recorded. It's on film. You can look at it on YouTube anytime you want, and you'll see your speakers there. Madam Chair, I would like to speak about R1. R1 is the building of a 150-student school in the Shawnigan Lake containment area. And I see that you have different options for this, and very glad to see that this was referred to the area APC and to all sorts of people it will affect, like the firefighters and several other institutions. One thing I did note about this is that the owners are a numbered company. And I have a hard time telling my neighbors that the school is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I don't see why we can't have the name of the owners of the property to ensure that this is not being invested in. Why? Could be directors here. We don't know. We just know that it's a numbered company. Could be the Russians. We don't know. So it would be nice if we could have the name of the owners so we know who are going to be our neighbors and who's investing in our area. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Anyone else? Last one.
Hi, my name's Pamela Walker. I live in Area H, and I'd just like to say that I am opposed to anything that Schnitzer does on our property, and because it just shouldn't be there. And I know it's way above your pay grade, and I thank you very much for being so diligent, but it has to be stopped. I know this is not the way to do it. But if we could think about how we could do it, I know they have big lawyers, but maybe they could come to common sense and see that our environment is much more important than making money. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Ms. Kaufman, you can do it.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to point out that my name was on the list, so I would appreciate my full 3 minutes. Thank you. I would like to speak to R8. I remain very concerned that the delegation of authority is a vehicle to exclude the public, particularly with development, sorry, lost my word, DPAs. Staff have acknowledged unclear DP guidelines are an issue, and I would like to see this deferred until the modernization is completed, so that we have those up to date and modern, and don't cut out the voice of the people. I was a little offended as an APC member when we are told that we are not qualified. I can cite instances when a QEP and the CVRD staff and a BC Environment Ministry missed clearing errors, but the APC flagged those errors. Many APC members are qualified or have useful local knowledge that this could be a contributor to the staffing decisions or staff's decisions. And staffing within the CVRD seems to continue to be an issue. I would like to speak to R9 on the public hearing guidelines are not clear, and nowhere is it advertised that the public can attend in person at the CVRD meetings, because not everyone lives in an area or has the equipment necessary to participate in a public hearing. And I would just like to acknowledge what a lot of the people have said here, that the agendas come out either late Thursday or Friday afternoon, and so that leaves less than 3 full business days for the public to read and ask questions before coming and speaking before you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We can move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have any delegations today. Next is correspondence, and C1 is a grant and aid request. Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, Reed Duncan, Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. And the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce to support the year-round visitor servicing operations of the Cowichan Regional Visitor Center.
I have, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Next up is reports, and R1 is a report from the Development Services Division, reapplication number DVP 23B02, PID 005028400. Did you want me to read the recommendation?
Maybe we'll just get a presentation first. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Directors. I have a slightly longer introduction for you on this particular application, just due to it being slightly atypical for how a variance application is presented. So please forgive me. I know it's sunny and warm, and I will try not to take up too much time. But item R8 of your agenda speaks to the efforts around development services modernization and enhancing our services here at the CVRD. We take that call very seriously and are making sustained efforts every day to improve and elevate that service delivery. I highlight that because it requires finding a balance at times between different areas of emphasis. On one hand, we want to efficiently and effectively process applications, but on the other hand, we do want to make sure that all directors are informed of the application, have complete information as much as possible, as we know that you're the ones that get the emails and the phone calls when there's a lot of activity or proposals in your community. So in an attempt to find that balance, before you today is a preliminary report outlining variances being requested for a proposed 3-story private school within the Shawnigan Village Growth Containment Boundary. The location is on the slides here. The proposed private school would accommodate approximately 150 students and will include ancillary offices, eating spaces, boarding facilities, faculty offices, and a motion capture studio. The current plan is for the school to contain 14 dorm bedrooms with the ability to accommodate 28 students. A site plan, next slide here, yes, and also the architectural renderings were included in your agenda package, attachment B and C of the report respectively. If we can go to the next slide. So the proposed use is permitted under the existing P1 zoning. The P1 zone permits a building height of 12 meters and requires a 6-meter setback from all the parcel lines. A height variance of 4.99 meters is being requested for the proposed building, which would bring the building height to a total of 16.99 meters. The applicant is also proposing to vary the rear yard setback from 6 meters to 2.4 and the side yard setback from 6 meters to 3.1 meters to accommodate the siting of the proposed building. Now, while development permits have been delegated, we do want to highlight that the proposed development will be subject to riparian protection, sensitive ecosystems, aquifer protection, wildfire hazard, and the protection of farming development permit areas. As I mentioned, these are delegated. However, staff anticipate that the directors will likely want a high degree of confidence that the intent of all these development permits can be met as they consider the variance request. Further, staff anticipate that there's probably going to be a high degree of public interest in the proposal, as it is, a significant building within the Shawnigan Village area. And it's for these reasons that we brought this report to you today. The intent of this report is really to serve as an introduction to the variance request. As I mentioned off the top, this is slightly atypical of how we tend to bring variance requests forward, but we are aiming to find that balance of getting this information to you early, knowing that there will be a degree of public interest, and knowing that there's going to be an iterative approach because we have sent out referrals to different agencies, and that typically results in minor changes to as an application as they go through that process. With that said, we do believe that the applicant is working hard to provide that technical information, and that's why we felt comfortable bringing this forward to you today. The process moving forward, as recommended by staff, would be to wait for those referrals to come in completely, work with the applicant to address any items that they may come up through that referral process, and then bring that information and the total package to the APC for their input, and ultimately back to the EASC with that complete information, the degree of confidence around whether a development permit can be issued for, or is likely to be issued for the application as presented, the APC comments, and of course, the opportunity for public input through the board's and the committee's regular process. So thank you, Chair, and again, forgive the unusually lengthy introduction, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and as you're already aware, the applicant is also keen to present and answer any questions.
Great. Would the applicant like to come up and add anything, or? Please do.
Hello, members of the committee. There we go. Members of the committee and Mr. Evans, hi, I'm Paul Pattison, and I'm here in support of Agenda Item R1, a proposed new post-secondary animation school. I'm the founder of Relish Studios, a company that is a video game developer and animation studio. I started the company 16 years ago, and our main focus is kids and family entertainment. We work with broadcasters and toy companies such as PBS, Mattel, Nickelodeon, and the NFL. In addition to the work that we do for these clients, we also produce our own original content. Most notable is Weirdwood Manor. That's an interactive storybook app for kids. Weirdwood first launched in 2016 and accumulated over 1 million downloads, won many awards, including iPad App of the Year from Apple. Later this summer, we will begin production on a Weirdwood Manor animated movie. 3 years ago, I opened our studio here in Duncan, just down the street on Station Street. It's run by Luke Carroll, who is a longtime island resident. He has had a long and illustrious career in animation. Before coming to work for me at Relish, he produced The Willoughbys, Netflix's first original animated movie. It's pretty impressive that a movie of that caliber was produced here in CVRD, in this neighborhood. That level of talent does exist on the island, but it needs to be cultivated. My company currently employs about 200 people, and Vancouver Island is the headquarters of our animation division. The animation team is growing consistently at about 50% a year for the last 3 years. And last year I began an exercise of 5 and 10-year planning for the company. Because animation is so labor intensive, we'll need to grow our team here from about 300 to 200 people. Most of our existing team have between 10 and 20 years of experience in animation. We're a very senior and experienced group. This is great, but for our team to succeed long-term, we need to have a healthy mix of junior, intermediate, and senior talent. We also need a healthy mix of diversity from gender, background, and life experience. Right now, if a high school student wants to pursue gaming or animation as a career, they need to attend very costly programs in Vancouver, where the cost of living is high, and there's no option to live at home and save on costs. This is why this very exciting project is coming about. I see a tremendous opportunity to help champion the gaming and animation community on Vancouver Island. We're starting a post-secondary school named the Vancouver Island School of Technical Arts, or VISTA for short. Our mandate will be to provide state-of-the-art education and tools for our students. Our curriculum has already been developed, and we're in the process of becoming certified with PTIB, the provincial body that regulates private education. Our students will not only be provided with modern and industry-relevant curriculum, but our own Relish animation staff will participate as instructors. Students will learn from industry professionals. In addition to that, we can provide innovative learning opportunities whereby students can participate in real projects with Relish clients such as Mattel and Nickelodeon. This kind of education will prepare our students to be highly sought after in the industry and positioned to have successful careers. While the school is situated in Shawnigan Lake, it's our hope that we'll educate students from all over CVRD and provide new opportunities that just don't currently exist here. These types of careers are creative, technical, green, well-paid, and in high demand. This new facility will be one that's not only used for education, but one we hope the whole community can participate in, create jobs, and be a new economic engine for the island. We want this to be a space the community can visit, participate, and be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to the committee. Do you have any questions for Mr. Brown or Mr. Everett? I don't know how to spell. What was his name? Pattison, Mr. Pattison. Okay, got it. Any questions? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Mr. Pattison, if you wouldn't mind. And thank you for that. I love technology, science fiction, science fact, brilliant stuff.
Right.
With the latest things that we're hearing about the advances in AI, How are you going to cope with, how would you think you could cope with including that in the curriculum?
Yeah, good question. The technology, whether it's motion capture, whether it's AI, these are all tools that allow us to create content in new and interesting ways. I think one key part of this school is that was mentioned is we'll have a fully fledged state-of-the-art motion capture facility. So I think this mix of industry and leading tools with the school will allow us to stay ahead of the curve, and our students will be learning the latest tools in tech, whether it's AI, motion capture, or whatever's next.
Director Acton?
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Brown.
Can you speak right into your mic?
Yeah, okay, sorry. I don't know what to do, I have two microphones. Mr. Brown, you mentioned the APC, the order of the process that you're following here, and I just have a question to that. So this is to be referred to the APC now, and then it would come back and be referred again?
Yes, through you, Chair, to the Director. Ultimately, this is a staff recommendation on a process to proceed. How we would envision it is, as these referrals come in, to keep the application moving through the process. We would envision that once those referrals come in, and we've made any necessary changes that do happen through that referral process, that we would take that complete application to the APC for their comment. And then from there, it would come back with a recommendation from the APC, the application in its entirety, in one package with that public notification complete for the committee to have as part of their deliberation.
Great, follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. So that's great to hear, because one of the concerns I had with how the package is now, the APC doesn't want partial, and they don't know how to deal with that. So it becomes kind of subjective meening, and so I really appreciate that this came sooner, or this process that you're testing out. So you're going to gather all the information for the APC, and this is a pretty significant project for Area B, and it will be the tallest building that we have. So after talking to staff and this meeting, I have a couple things that I would request that you have for the APC, so that they can give a good. I think it's just better for everyone. When the APC is not presented with all the information, it's frustrating for developers, it's frustrating for the APC. So it would be great to see what are the visual impacts on the neighborhood. Like that drawing was great, but I still don't quite understand the scale. What does it look like from the road or surrounding areas? And I know the APC is going to want to see environmental impacts, and they recognize they're not the experts, but they like to go through it. And as somebody has mentioned, there are sometimes concerns that are valid. And then, yeah, I guess that's it. Just those two things. So I did get a resolution from staff. I don't know if that needs to be included, but having those two items included in the package to the APC, I think they can give us some good information when this comes back. So thank you.
If I may, Chair, I think, thank you, Director Acton. I think we understand the intention there, and looking at those development permit guidelines, I think, again, it's a tricky one because we want to acknowledge that the development permit approvals are a delegated approval, but at the same time, we know these questions are going to ultimately influence as you deliberate the variance. So both those things, whether there wants to be a motion or from the committee or not, both myself and I think the applicant are here and hear that intention, and we can accommodate that as we move the application forward through the APC and to the EASC if that's the way the committee recommends it.
Any other questions? Would you like to make a motion?
Well, the last part of it, so do I need to include that in the motion, or should I? Would that be best?
It's up to you, Director Acton. They will take it under advisement, but you could make it formal and put it in the motion.
Okay, well, it's formal and I'll put it in motion.
That would be
I
great.
trust you guys, but I'll read you my motion, I'll send it out in a second. That it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 23B02 be referred to staff to additional analysis on the visual impacts to neighboring properties, environmental impacts, and servicing, prior to referring the application to the Electoral Area B Shawnigan Lake Advisory Planning Commission.
And do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Please send that to Amanda and Jennifer, thanks. It's 2:30, and I'd like to take a break, but I also know that we've got an audience full of people who are very interested in R3. So would it be possible to move R3 to the next one? All right, let's do R3 and then we'll take a break. I have to make a motion? I can reorder. I have that power, wow. Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not have a PowerPoint to accompany this report of mine, R3, on the agenda. It's basically a procedural report describing the aftermath of the July 2021 resolution made at the board to move this matter to a public meeting if agreement could be reached on a draft covenant. I guess at my last speaking with the applicant, there is no agreement as I understand it. Nevertheless, the recommendation is before you to, as suggested, possibly give an additional 2 weeks opportunity for the applicant to accept the covenant as written in consideration of going later to a public meeting, an informal meeting, not a hearing. The standing board resolution from 2021, of course, was made prior to the election, and we have some new directors, and it's actually taken us that long back and forth with the applicant to try and arrive at wording that was mutually agreeable, and as I say, we haven't managed to quite do that yet. So anyway, that's why my recommendation reads the way it is, and I'll answer any questions if the committee has any questions. Otherwise, I'd invite Mr. Kara, representing the applicant, to say whatever he would like to say to the committee.
Mr. Kara, would you like to?
Absolutely.
Is that a public information meeting? I'm sorry, I just didn't understand.
I'm sorry, we can't deal with that right now. Thank you. No, not right now. Please, Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, committee and everyone else. So thanks for your time. So just with respect to the covenant, after more consideration with respect to specific language, the area that Schnitzer and the landlord were stuck on was on section 3, where it said jointly and severally. Our legal counsel had said they had concerns with the jointly and severally, because we can't, the analogy that was given is if we can't control, if the landlord brought someone on site, a contractor, and something were to occur, Schnitzer itself wouldn't have any control. Similarly, I guess the best example I can give is, down on Boys Road, GFL operates a transfer station. If that land was owned by the CBRD doesn't really have, can't really control the daily activities of what GFL is doing. So, but having further discussions, we're amenable to the language in the current covenant as is. So there's no need to give us 2 weeks to make that determination. But we're in agreement with the covenant as presented in this package.
Thank you, Mr. Kara. So I'll turn to the committee. Do you have questions for Mr. Tippett or Mr. Kara? No questions. I'll turn to the director of the area.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting us know that. Appreciate it. And I guess also thank you to those that have participated and come forward and given us comments and sent letters and videos and pictures.
And Mr. Kara, you can sit down now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And, you know, this is, what we've heard today is, hopefully everybody can hear me, is consistent to what the community has been saying about the desire to protect the aquifer. And, you know, a covenant, I think people spoke about this earlier, but a covenant attempts to mitigate, but it doesn't protect the aquifer. By example, the last 3 years, our community has witnessed the consequences of a huge fire at the site and that of an unprecedented atmospheric river. You know, the decision really is, as also mentioned, about the right use of this land for the future generations and the protection of the aquifer. So, given that, I would move option 2 on page 3 of the staff report to deny the application. Thank you.
And I have a seconder. Discussion? Director Acton?
Thank you, Director Acton. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, I'm going to support this, the motion that's been forward by Director Markman, because this to me is deja vu. I have a similar problem with protecting the aquifer in Area C, and it's something which should be paramount in these difficult times with climate change. And coupled with, I think I've heard that the Cassidy Aquifer has been designated as highly vulnerable. That to me is another big, is a big factor in my decision to support this. And the community has made their views known, and we should make every effort we can as the elected representative to pay close attention to what the community is saying. And I shudder every time, and I use the term external aggression. And this is any kind of pollution or factors which will affect the aquifers below. So in this particular case, I'm listening to the community and I'm listening to the director for the area, and I am in full support of denying this.
Thank you, Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the community for coming out from way over there. We're on the opposite end. And we may be far apart, but I can feel your anxiety, and I know what that anxiety feels like. I was sitting in that same seat 9 years ago. And there's, in your comments though, lots of assumptions that we're not doing what we should do. I heard comments like that, and staff, and there's a process. So we're going through a process, and what I want to say is I also heard Sonia Furstenau's name mentioned, and there's one thing that Sonia taught us for sure, that you kind of, the decision makers are doing, you kind of have to think that the decision makers are trying to do their best, and we are definitely trying to do our best here. And anyway, I guess I'm getting into a little bit of a rant. I will be supporting the director as well, or supporting that motion that was put on the table for several reasons, and because of that's where we are right now in the process.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll call a question. No. Director Morrison? Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this has been a very long-running file, and read it with interest, and came here with an open mind, and listened to all the community members speaking to the issue. And I'm a little unsure of the implications of this resolution being supported, because I heard a number of folks who contributed during public input speaking to things like this isn't an appropriate location, that shouldn't exist here. There, many other things that are sort of outside the realm of what we're discussing here. And I get the intent of the motion, and I'm likely to support it, but what I don't see in the report is the implications of the denial. If there will be a continued ability for the applicants to continue in the operation, and to what extent, and what ability there would be to influence proactive and positive aquifer protection items if this is denied. Is there a scale back to a level of operation that will be within the regulations that as they sit now, or will there be a series of cascading events that will precipitate other actions? So without having that clarity, I'm very willing to support the director in the resolution that is on the floor, but I don't think I have enough information to know what the possible implications are.
Madam Chair, through you to Director Morrison and the directors today, you are in committee making a recommendation to the board, and the board's decision would be final next week. And so if there are outstanding questions, staff would be able to do some research and provide information to the directors prior to the board next week. And we would leave it at that.
So I feel like this is a difficult situation because normally we have questions for the planners and staff, and then we have a discussion with full information. So it would have been really helpful if you'd asked that question earlier, because it sounds like Ms. Charoff is not prepared to answer it right now.
Madam Chair, the questions are of nature that we would be consulting with our legal counsel and would be providing direction in closed, because it would be specific to closed matters. The committee also has the option to defer discussion to a future EASC meeting if you're not prepared to make a decision today.
Okay, so that, yeah, I understand that, and that's unfortunate because it would have been good for the community to hear the answer, obviously. Director McClinton.
Question through to the staff, maybe, if I can.
We're back to question period. We're back to questioning.
No. I just think it might be helpful, if, I don't know if this question can be answered. I'm going to just assume, I know we sit around at this board table and we talk about water and protecting our water, and I'm just going to assume that's the intent of all the directors here. If this is denied, what tools are we left with moving forward to protect the aquifer?
So, Madam Chair, through you to the director, so we've been in a process of reviewing a rezoning application. Prior to that, we were in bylaw enforcement proceedings. At the conclusion of a rezoning application process, we would go back to bylaw enforcement proceedings. And that would involve us, initially coming back to you and directing you on the steps and the course of action. And I'm not going to speak to that in an open meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jelf. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any more discussion?
Madam Chair, are we allowed to?
No, I'm sorry. Director Acton?
So, did Ms. Charoff say that there's a rezoning application has been started?
That's what this is about.
Okay, never mind.
Any more discussion? So does everyone feel that they have enough information to make a decision? Director McClinton?
I'm concerned that we're going to be left without the tools we need to protect the aquifer if this is denied. I'm in full support of the community members and the director. I'm wondering if we might want to refer this for further discussion. Is there any, I don't know if we've fully discussed this, and if are we doing the best thing for the aquifer? I mean, that's my intent by supporting the director of the area, and it seems to me that there may be some misunderstanding, but I could be wrong on that. I'm just wondering if I don't know how, I know we're in committee, so it's a little bit different. Is there an appetite to have further discussion around this? Or?
Well, now's the time to discuss it, but if you would like some legal advice, legal information, then we would need to refer it and then do that in a closed session. But we don't have a lawyer handy, do we? So I guess my question to Ms. Cheryl, would we need to have a lawyer, or would you be able to handle the legal matters if we went into closed right now?
As a registered professional planner, I can't speak to you on legal matters, so we would be looking for a lawyer, which.
Yes, right.
Mr. Tippett would,
All right.
investigate. So that may be possible today, it may not.
Okay, so the decision we have to make right now is, would you like to refer this so that we can have some legal advice and then come back to it at another meeting to make the decision, or would you like to make a decision now? Pardon me? We have a motion on the floor, but a referral motion would take precedence. So I'm asking the committee if they would like to refer it.
I would opt for the referral.
So if someone would like to make the referral motion and second it, then we would do that.
I'll move that we refer this.
It's been moved and seconded. Are you seconding it, Director Morrison?
I'd like to just make sure we've got clarification that it'll be referred to staff for legal information on the option presented or the option on the floor.
Right. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the subject of referral, perhaps I can offer a little bit of clarification here. I wish I'd brought in all the files I've got that I've been fighting for the last 5 or 6 years, and which goes back 20 odd years as well. I'll tell you what will happen if you refer this. It will go on for another few years, and you'll end up with boxes and boxes of files. You will go to the province, you will go to the feds, and you will go to everywhere else, and nothing will happen. So referral, really good luck on that one. Thank you.
Director Atkin.
My question is to the covenant. Does the covenant,
Point of order, Madam Chair. A referral motion isn't debatable except for the propriety.
well, okay, I'll find out later.
Director Martman.
So I'd just like to speak to the referral, and I would speak against it. I think the process that we have in place right now allows us to deny this application and make that recommendation to the board, and we have time between now and the board meeting, and I think this is something the entire board should be aware of and should be part of the conversation if we're going to have any input from legal before that. So I think it's keeping it at the committee level. It's time to move it up to the board and have that consult before it comes to the board. I don't know the timing of when that would hurt. It may push it back another week or so.
When would it come to the board? Next board meeting, which is next week.
Yeah, I guess the question was if the direction is to staff is to have something for the board to digest around this, it may take another 2 weeks beyond that, if that's necessary.
Can we ensure that the board is fully briefed? In the past, they get like a paragraph, a motion, they don't have much to go on. In fact, some of us have little to go on, so we need a lot more background on this as it gets referred to, as it gets before the board.
Ms. Cheryl, help us here, please.
Madam Chair, so an option would be to proceed with the motion on the floor, which was to deny the application, and a second resolution to direct staff to provide, to consult with legal counsel on next steps. in regards to enforcement.
Prior to the
Prior
board.
to the
Prior to the
board.
board. All right, so I'm sure Director Morrison would like to make that motion after we deal with the one on the floor.
I thought we had a referral motion on the floor.
We do. Any more discussion on the referral? All those in favor? Opposed? Everyone's, except for Ian, yeah. So we have a motion, we have a motion on the floor right now. Would you like to read the motion?
The motion on the floor is that it be recommended to the board that application number 03H16RS PID 008903603 be denied.
Any more discussion? Director Acton.
Sorry, I think some of my confusion is around the covenant. Are we simply denying the covenant part or both? The rezoning proceeding? So if we were to actually have the covenant on there and then it come back and the rezoning denied, at least the covenant is there.
I think Mr. Tippett will answer your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The motion on the floor is to deny the application for rezoning. The covenant is simply the subject of my report because that's what was resulting in the year-and-a-half delay between the board's previous motion on going to a public meeting and now was trying to arrive at an acceptable wording. So the covenant is simply a component of the rezoning. If it was supported and we move forward with the application, it would accompany the rezoning through the rest of the process. So motion on the floor is strictly about the zoning application.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. Motion's carried. I would really appreciate a motion.
So I'd like to move that staff consult with legal to investigate any technical issues.
And before the board meeting.
Before the next board meeting.
And report back.
And report back to the board, yeah.
I have a seconder. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. And Ben, could you mind providing that to Amanda? Thanks. Yes, and so we're going to take a 10-minute break. Welcome back. We're going to go back to R2. Ms. Dubin, oh, Dubinia. Don't. Say it one more time.
Dubena.
Dubina.
Thank you, Chair. Should I go ahead? Okay.
Please go ahead.
So this application before you is a development variance permit, or DVP, to vary the subdivision regulations in respect of the servicing requirements in Part 13, Section 13.1 of the Electoral Area H zoning bylaw number 1020, as it applies to the subject property in relation to minimum parcel size for subdivision. The subject property is within the Shell Beach Estates subdivision and has two connections to Shell Beach Water Utility, which is currently a private utility and does not meet the definition of community water system in both the Electoral Area H zoning bylaw and in the CVRD works and servicing bylaw. However, Shell Beach Water Utility is in the stages of becoming a CVRD owned and operated water utility. And when that is completed, It would meet the definition of community water system in the works and servicing bylaw, but not within the Area H zoning bylaw, which requires a minimum connection of 75, and Shell Beach Water Utility currently has 39 connections. So this proposed variance would include Shell Beach Water Utility as a community water system for the purposes of subdivision of the subject property. Sorry, I feel like I'm yelling. Requiring that both parcels are connected to Shell Beach Water Utility. The variance would allow the applicants to apply for a boundary adjustment with the neighboring parcel to the north, followed by a two-lot subdivision that would meet the minimum parcel size for parcels served by a community water system in the R2 zone, which is 0.4 hectares. The conceptual subdivision plan is on the slide at the moment. And staff are recommending issuance of the permit with alternatives included in the staff report.
Thank you. It was super complicated report. Does anyone have any questions? Great, everyone understood perfectly except me. But I read it 3 times, so I do understand. Is the applicant here? No applicant, okay. So I'll turn to the director of the area.
Wow, 2 in a row. Very unusual for Area H, but I'll take it. Thank you for the report. And I too read it 3 times, trying to sort of trying to understand the whole thing, because there's history here and different bylaws and different, yeah. I think the thing that came up for me, though, was the letters that were sent by neighbors, and their concern is around water. And it was great to see in the referrals that staff have said that the water is not going to be an issue for these places. So I think that's really helpful in coming to a conclusion. And I think the timing as well with Shell Beach moving towards the CVRD helps also, knowing that the CVRD does utilities fantastically. So with all that, I would move the recommendation. Thank you.
And a seconder? I have a seconder. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to R4.
R4 is a report from the Development Services Division, reapplication number RZ19I01, Laketown Ranch Housing Agreement Bylaw number 4454.
Ms. Pressman, you're going to speak to it? Great.
So to give a brief overview of the bylaw before you, the housing agreement bylaw is enacted by the registration of the covenant that is attached to the bylaw. And this is in relation to the zoning and OCP amendment bylaws for Laketown Ranch, bylaws 4429 and 4430. A draft version of the housing agreement covenant was presented in June 2022 and has been finalized. And so just to summarize, the housing agreement requires that no age restrictions will be placed on any residential occupancy and prohibits short-term accommodations of less than 30 days. And also leases 9 of the manufactured home sites to a affordable housing provider, likely to be Habitat for Humanity, or another in the future if Habitat for Humanity ceases to operate those sites, it would need to be supported by the CVRD, an alternative housing provider. And also it sets the rate of the initial leases for those affordable housing sites at starting at a rate of $475 per month, which is at the time of drafting was approximately 50% of the cost to the of the other manufactured home sites. So if you have any questions, I will try to answer those.
Thank you. I turn to the committee. Director Deck.
So I'd like a little more explanation about what can happen after the initial, it says the costs can go up. Can you explain that to me, how that would work? Because I don't know who sets the costs going up.
The increase to the rental price,
Rental,
to the
yeah,
lease,
yes,
to the
yeah.
lease rates
Thank
for
you,
the,
yeah.
for the affordable housing sites, would only be, would be capped at what the province regulates under the residential tenancy
Okay,
branch.
perfect, thank
Yeah.
you.
Director Atkin?
Yeah, I guess my question is around kind of like what we've heard today is around covenants and like who would monitor that covenant?
It's through the chair to Director Acton. The CVRD is responsible for monitoring the covenant. The covenant doesn't have any set terms on the rate of monitoring. So it's up to the CVRD.
Like, would you, so essentially, someone might have to complain that that's not happening, or like, how do we, if it's up to the CVRD, how does the CVRD follow through with that?
Madam Chair, I'll just jump in here to Director Acton. So this is the first housing agreement that the CVRD is entering into. And so we're very interested in how it will be implemented and rolled out going forward. We'll be monitoring it very closely. And as Michelle noted, it is the CVRD's responsibility to monitor and enforce all of its covenants on this site and others.
Director.
Follow up then, and so, like any of the covenants then, if it's CVRD pays for the monitoring then, essentially?
Madam Chair?
Not the owners of the property don't pay for our costs if we have to do anything.
We have a responsibility. It's our obligation to monitor the covenants that we've entered into. So yes,
Okay.
it's our cost. And it's also part of our development services modernization process.
Something to be discussed further.
Madam Chair, I also should note that the applicants are on WebEx if there are any questions of them as well.
Oh, great. Would the applicants like to add anything?
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Just our original agreement.
We can hardly
here-
hear you, Greg.
One sec, sorry. I always get accused of being a loud talker. I'm trying not to be. Can you hear me clearly?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Habitat for Humanity, very well respected and good history. They started in 1976. And the local representation and the people we've dealt with for now over a year and a half on this have been excellent to deal with. So, but the CVRD and the legal teams from both sides have written in that should anything happen to Habitat for Humanity, it would obviously be taken over by another nonprofit and or agency to make sure that the nine units were used over a period of time. The other thing is Habitat did not want all 9 in the first year because they don't have the resources and the funding to do what they do in the first. So they wanted to do it over a period of a few years. So hope that helps a bit.
Thanks, Mr. Adams. Director Abbott.
I wonder if the applicant, Greg, if you could comment on the 9 units, are they going to be spread out throughout the complex or in a specific area?
We had discussions on that as well, and they will be spread out. We don't want them to be congested in one area. We want them to be part of the community. So, and the other thing was, it will happen in phases. We will build this, 20, 25 units at a phase, these clusters. If you're on site, we talk about other clusters around the park. So we would give 1 or 2 per cluster was the idea. And then that time frame would also work into that absorption rate would work well for Habitat for Humanity as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Director Deck?
Is this just, it doesn't need to be for Greg or Mr. Whatever, Mr. Greg. Is this just about the Habitat for Humanity homes or dwellings? Or is it about all the dwellings throughout?
The, through the chair to Director Deck, the covenant has terms that apply to the entire residential development regarding what I mentioned earlier, the age restrictions
Okay.
and the short-term rentals.
Good, thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Turn to the director of the area. Director Deck, would you like to?
Yes, I move the motion.
And it's been seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Ms. Pressman. Moving on. Oh, we get to do waste management now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. R5 is a report from the Recycling and Waste Management Division, re-amendment bylaw number 4446. Did you want me to read the recommendation?
Maybe Ms. Sardi would like to
Thank
talk
you,
to us
Madam
first.
Chair. So the recommendation is to, sorry, just finding it. Recommendation to the board that bylaw number 446, garbage and/or recyclable material collections amendment bylaw 2023 be considered for 3 readings and adoption. Give you a little bit of background if you want.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this amendment is to, first of all, to update the curbside utilities fees this year to offset cost increases in operations of curbside collection. So the last time the fees were updated was 2020. And as you well know, the increase in landfill and garbage has significantly gone up since then. There's also been additional cost in maintaining our old fleet, as well as some wage increases. So this, we basically need $80,000 in additional revenue to offset these costs. Therefore, we're recommending the costs that you see in Appendix A. So residents that currently have recycling only will see a $2 increase this year. Residents with recycling and biweekly garbage will see a $13 increase. And residents with recycling and weekly garbage during the month of June and October, from June to October, will see an increase of $17. The other change in here is, as you know, we have been doing a 6-day collection to basically manage our aging fleet. We're hoping to resume a 5-day collection coming this fall when our new trucks arrive. But we still think it's worthwhile making sure that we can do 6-day collection in case there's any issues. We know that in other area, Saturday collections sometimes happen when there's missed collection. Those are the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you just remind me when you plan to roll out the 3-stream collection?
Yeah, so 3-stream is planned to roll out in 2025. And we're currently working on a list of other amendments that we want to do to the curbside collection bylaw. So this is just the bare minimum that we need to change right now.
I would say that my area will be so happy when we move back to 5-day-a-week collection. Any questions for Ms. Sardi? Director Morrison?
I have a couple of questions. So firstly, yeah, going back to the 5-day cycle would be wonderful. Do we have any update on the arrival of our new fancy curbside trucks?
What, through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Morrison. So what we heard is first they were going to come in 2024, then we got word that they were going to come in July, and now we've got word that they're coming in August, so we're holding our breath.
All right.
Don't hold your breath. The follow-up, please.
Yep.
So just on the math, and I'm not necessarily the greatest at math, but you indicated a $17 increase, which I would be really happy if that was the amount for areas F and I. But according to the table, I count $24. So has there been a change to that utility fee increase?
So the final fees should be as set out. So in the staff report on the financial considerations, You can see the change there from 2020 to 2022 to 2023, so the current rates. So for area I and F, we're going from 178 to 202. And sorry, I'm not very good at doing math on the spot.
That's in conflict with what is stated in the financial
Oh, in the piece
considerations
there.
above. Like I said, I'd love it to be the 17 and not the 24, so I'd like to get confirmation of that.
Right. So it is possible, the rates in the tables are right. It's possible that the math in the financial consideration, I'm doing it right now. Yes, so it is $24 for, yes, so what I said there before then is incorrect. The rates that are set out in the appendix are correct. So the increase for area I and F is 24.
Thank you, and my final, if I may, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
And hopefully we can have ironclad clarification of that prior to the bylaw going to the board. Lastly, and I know you're aware of this because you got fair warning, the June to October is not meeting the needs of communities as far as the weekly pickup. There's wildlife issues to be concerned. I've raised this for a number of years. I'm really hoping to get a change to the schedule so that we could maybe start a little bit later. And I use this in the community because they come and talk to me all the time. We don't want sleepy, hungry bears wandering around the town in November looking to tip over garbage cans and feed. So can we make some progress on that? And I'm sure Mr. Postings is already working with you on that.
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Morrison. Yes, we're very keen to also protect wildlife as part of the solid waste management plan. Actually talked to Conservation Officer and WildSafe BC yesterday. We talked about changing the window. They provided us with a recommendation. They did mention too that when we roll out 2025 service, there'll likely be no need to have bi-weekly or weekly garbage collection because a lot of the attractants are now being collected in weekly organics. So that's something to be researched further. So as I mentioned earlier on, there will be a whole host of changes to the curbside bylaw for 2025. With that, we can look at other changes for 2024 as well.
Thank you. Director Deck.
Director Moore, through the chair. Director Morrison talked about sleepy, hungry bears at the end of the season, and my folks in Area I are talking about the very alert hungry bears at the beginning of the season, so I realize there's a dilemma there. Thank you.
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director Deck. So what we understand from the conservation officers is bear are generally an issue from March to the end of November. So yeah, this window doesn't really reflect when they're active.
All right. Any more questions? Director McClinton.
A couple questions. Two questions to the chair. Just curious, I think I know the reason, but maybe for anybody watching at home, why wasn't this brought forward during budget? I'm actually kind of glad it wasn't because we were dealing with a lot, but is it because it's a utility?
Through to Director McClinton, I actually have to refer to my friends, maybe Natalie. This is something we have talked about. When should this come forward? And I think for the next budget cycle, it was part of the budget package that we want to make this increase. Now we're bringing it forward because we're about to send out the utility bills. But yes, I think we want to change the timing so it comes to you earlier, but I'm going to let Ms. Werner comment on that.
Oops, sorry, thanks. Through the chair to Director McClinton. Yeah, this was part of the budget process, but the bylaw hadn't been done at that point. So there was consideration of an increase that would be coming forward. We are looking at moving that forward into November for next year so that these bylaw rates come in, the decision's been made, and then we move forward with the budget process. The last couple of years, it's actually been sort of the other way around, where the increases were determined that they were required through the budget process, and then the bylaw has been done to clean up what was done during the budget process.
And, you know, I'm likely going to be supporting this because I know we need to collect our garbage and this is all falls in line. But, you know, $17 isn't insignificant to, you know, the amount that the residents in many of the areas, you know, the increases they saw this year. What happens if this isn't supported? What happens?
Through to you, Madam Chair, to Director McClinton, we would have a budget shortfall in Function 515.
And then
You'd have to make it up, Director McClinton.
what, like, does service decline, or, you know, is that those sorts of things would have to happen? Is that?
Through the chair to Director McClinton, what would happen is if the service turned into a deficit, it is required to be done and caught up the next year. So it would be mandated by legislation that the change would have to be to increase the revenue to meet the needs of that service, or to cut the service at that point in time. Either way, though, the money would have to be made up in the next year, and there would be an increase.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know, just that I want to say thank you. It's just nice to know all the ramifications.
Final comment?
I have a question. How do these costs stack up against our other jurisdictions in the valley? Do you know?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we're looking at a detailed review of how these costs compare. I understand that they are comparable. For 3 Stream 2, we're looking at other regions and seeing how they compare and trying to understand if our numbers are different, why are they different? For example, how much are we setting into reserve? How much are they setting into reserve? Right. So on and so forth.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? No? So we have a recommendation. Would you like to read it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that bylaw number 4446, garbage and/or recyclable materials collection amendment bylaw 2023, be considered for 3 readings and adoption.
Do I have a mover and a seconder? Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, moving right along to R6.
Thank you. R6 is a report from the Utilities Division, Shawnigan Village Water System, investigation, ministry registration application, and system establishment.
Welcome.
Thank you. So this is just a report to bring back a report from June of 2022 that was on recommendation to work with the developers of the proposed Shawnigan Estates development to prepare an application for pre-registration of a wastewater system with the Ministry of Environment. That report was forwarded to the Area B Advisory Planning Committee, where that request was denied. So following the report and that meeting, the developer's engineer informed staff that they were moving ahead with the application for pre-registration on their own. We also, utilities and land use services staff, met with the developer and their consultant to discuss the proposed development application and the requirements. So the recommendation here is that staff postpone investigation of treated effluent disposal suitability and potential options for the establishment of a sewer system related to the Shawnigan Estates proposed development until the board has considered a report from the Development Services Division.
Any questions? Pardon me? We'll just talk about it first. Yep. Any discussion? Questions? All right, I'll turn to the director of the area.
I would move staff's recommendation.
And would you like to read it? Do I have a seconder? Yes, we got a seconder. Please read it now. The timing's perfect.
Go. Sorry, the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that staff postpone investigation of treated effluent disposal suitability and potential options for the establishment of a sewer system for the lands known as Lot A and B, Plan E, PP 58643, and Lot A, Plan 11434, until board has considered a report from the Development Services Division on an application for proposed Shawnigan Estates development.
Point of order.
I caught that. Plan EPP 58646 is actually what we're talking about. Thank you, Director Martman. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Great. And we're moving on to R7.
R7 is a report from the Strategic Initiatives Division, re-official community plan, community meetings.
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors, through the chair. Since we have completed the most recent ideas fairs and open houses from the period November 2022 to the end of February 2023, we've had some requests from directors to hold smaller meetings in their community. So this is specifically on the OCP, not the local area plans. So this report is recommending one additional meeting per electoral area, up to 15 people, and one electoral area meeting on an area of common policy interest, up to 50 people, to accommodate that. We're also recommending that the funds for that be set aside in 250, budget 250, community information. There's currently a balance in there of 26,900, so this would commit 12,000. It's, the recommendation is for 500 per meeting, which staff is not anticipating would be an actual cost, and up to 7,500 for an electoral area-wide policy meeting. To give you an example, we recently had one in one of the electoral areas and we had no costs incurred. It was a meeting under 15. The rental space was provided to us and the coffee and tea was organized by the community.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Breen? Director Morrison.
So I'm going back to budget discussions. The community information line item, I think I'm guessing at this point, but is that not the budget that was specifically allocated to directors' use and direction, of course, through the approval of the board, but for items that were deemed important by the directors?
Ms. Weiner knows the answer.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, yes, this is the budget that was established for Function 250. I think there was an amount of $3,000 per area, which was used as a baseline to come up with the $27,000 for this community information, and that was for the directors.
Director Atkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, if we go back to budget, that budget line, I felt like I was really fighting for it. And we don't have a lot in there. And I hear Ms. Breen, she's saying that it's not really going to cost a lot, but I think we're going down, it's too vague and slippery slope. Like, that is our one budget that we have as a director for our role in the community. And so I don't think I can support this. So even Director Martman had a huge community thing happen here today. He might need some money to get a message out to his community that, like, this, you know, if well, let's not use that example, but if he had an example like in Shawnigan Lake, when it wasn't even a CVRD matter, the community needed to hear about it. So, you know, it can be used for that. It can be used for many little things, and we don't have a lot of support and funds for that. So I really hope that we don't dip into it for these kind of meetings. And my other maybe comment, half question is, so I get the intent of the small meetings. I feel like there's going to be a big community backlash on that. It sounds a little selective, or you know, like, who are the special 15 people who got this meeting? Then there's other groups are going to want a meeting too, or it's this whole OCP process. Like, if you look online, a lot of things get really blown out of proportion. So I don't know that I even support the idea of having. I'd have to have more information on, like, what kinds of meetings are these and who's going, kind of thing. And if there's no cost, then is it a director's meeting that we use that budget to have a director's meeting and staff just comes in and answers questions so that we can have a conversation with our community on the OCP? So I'm just not totally clear.
Thank you. So I'm just going to say that I think this would be beneficial to consult with the farmers, because we had the agricultural plan presented last Electoral Area Services Committee, and they haven't been, there's sort of a special. Ms. Breen, would consulting with the agricultural community be part of this?
The reference in the staff report would, for the larger electoral area meeting, would be agriculture. And to clarify to Director Atkin through the chair, the requests that we've had so far have only been two. One has been for a seniors group, and another has been for business community. But staff wanted to be fair instead of saying yes and systematically fair to all electoral areas, and that's why we've come forward with a recommendation limiting one per electoral area. The directors are free to change that number, but also be really transparent that there is an opportunity and there are these requests coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
I think I'm missing something here, because the express intent that I've understood the purpose of our EPCs is that the members selected and appointed to those bodies are a representative sample of our community, and that it's a perfect target audience to go to, and if the agenda is formulated correctly, then it sounds to me like that's the place where this resides, and there shouldn't be additional costs. I can understand supporting a region-wide issue on a topic like agriculture, and I'll tell you, Area F is not a hotbed of agriculture, but I would still support it. So I'd like to see a reworking of this. I'm just not happy with the idea that we go to the community information budget for this. Thank you.
Other comments, Director Mortman?
So I see this as more enabling than it is being directive, in that and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the way I read it is that, you know, if I feel that this is a good spend of $500, then I can go ahead and ask this to take place. Is that sort of how it's set up?
Through the chair to Director Martman, what this will do is actually put a hold on 12. It's committing $12,000, so it would not be expended out of that community information budget until it's determined that those funds are no longer needed. So at this point, there would be $12,000 put aside, and it would be held. And the community information budget would be down to $14,000.
And that, so that means that it would be, there'd still be $2,500 per area. Is that correct? Like the remainder, no, it wouldn't be, it'd be less than that, it'd be more like, what would be the remainder left per area? Thank you.
Don't have a calculator in front of me at this moment. I'm not that good. Usually I'm behind the screen, so.
2,900 total.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up to 500 for each electoral area. It could be less, and it doesn't have to be used. So,
1,000 of each area, just over $1,000 each.
yeah, total between the electoral area-wide policy and the electoral area individual meetings.
Director Martman?
Thanks for the follow-up, Chair. And I think, so I'm in support of this because of the one thing that my community has said, besides today, this morning, or this afternoon, is the OCP is of critical importance to them, and the more engagement I can get, the better I feel that something, that we're collecting that information. So, and, I've never used this fund in 3 years that I know of. If I have, let me know. So I'm in favor of, and for Area H, that this is, let's get them engaged. Thank you.
Director Morrison, did I see your hand up? No. Director Abbott?
I like the sounds of this. Coralie, Ms. Breen and Ms. Garnett have spoken to my seniors group, and I think we're organizing a meeting for seniors. I'm a little worried about the 15 people, and though Director Morrison mentioned it, I'm thinking, could you not attend a public forum and talk to one item beyond the agenda to talk about the harmonized, and then perhaps be the first person? But it would incentivize me to hold a much larger forum to talk about numerous items, one of which would be the harmonized.
Through the chair to Director Abbott, yes, absolutely. We can do that, and we do that when invited to do that, yes.
So, yeah, so I'm wondering whether it makes sense to just work with directors on what they need, or you're trying to sort of bound it?
Through the chair, I think, again, to be fair and transparent to all directors, and in terms of our staff resources as well, not just financial. So at this point in time, we try to respond and be quite nimble in terms of those responses. And I think many of you here will know that we've been in your communities ad hoc for other reasons. But if we get 5 requests from one, and we're totally spent out in terms of our personal resources, and then we get 3 other ones, and we have to say, oh, gee, I'm sorry, we've got X, Y, and Z. We just want to be fair and offer and something that's equitable for all electoral areas. So that's the genesis behind the staff report.
I appreciate that. Any more discussion? Director Atkin?
Yeah, so I appreciate like the need to want to have more engagement, which is great, but with the use fair, I don't see it as fair if only one group gets to have that kind of specialized meeting. And I guess I'm also stuck on this as the budget. Like, how big is your budget that there's not $12,000 in it as contingency or something to come back? Because our budget's only 27,000, so for us to delegate 12,000 out, I think is short-sighted of us. Like, somebody might want to take a course. We could move it to something else, but this is our budget, and we have very little ways to improve the way we do our job.
Ms. Cheryl?
Madam Chair, through you to the directors. So the Strategic Initiatives Division has an improved consultation plan. It's a robust consultation plan, and they're trying very carefully to manage the dollars that are allocated to the various tasks to achieve that plan. So when we get, and they get requests to do additional meetings, it is considered scope creep. And so we're trying to address that in a respectful way, recognizing that there is benefit to having some additional focused consultation in your communities. And so we're really just trying to put some boundaries around that. If there's an interest in revisiting the original consultation plan, we'd need to come back to you with that and consider budget amendments. I will add that we will be coming back to this committee with an information report on spending for the broader 325 service, because these are significant big projects. It's not the only one we've got going on. We're looking at a comprehensive land use bylaw. We're looking at our development services modernization and implementation of a land management system. So lots of competing priorities. So we're just asking to think carefully about that and just to let us know. We're happy to deliver on what you want to see happen in your communities, but we need to also do a really good job to try to follow the budget and to allocate the money accordingly.
So follow up?
Okay.
So sorry, I don't know who I interrupted. Could we sever the motion then, Madam Chair?
Sure.
To have one part about each area getting a meeting, and then where this money comes from?
So you would like to sever number 4 off?
Well, I think
I don't know how this would work.
I think just 2 would have to come out. So if 1, 3, and 4 passes, then staff would have to find a different way to fund it.
So Director McClinton.
A possible recommendation through the chair. Votes like this, you wish you could abstain, but we'll pursue, we'll push forward. I think I get the intent of this. I know as a new director, the turnout at the last Ideas Fair was overwhelming and in stark contrast to the engagement that had happened previously to that point. I've got some things that are being referred to the APC, and while at this moment I don't know if I would need to have that meeting, I think I would like at least a little bit of time to reflect on that. Perhaps the directors that would want to have this meeting could take a little bit of time to think about that. Perhaps it just remains at only 2 and the cost is nominal, and we can sort of vote on that as a board at a later date. Because it sounds like, to me, some of the more experienced directors, have a pretty good sense of their communities and are more comfortable with this process. So, the OCP is a pretty big process. It only happens once every few decades, and I think, it's something that, I would like just a little bit of time to think about, if possible. I don't know if we can do that.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Coralie and Ali, and I hope you don't mind me using your first names at all. They have done a great job over the last few years. They've dug into every aspect. They've had meetings, they've formed committees, they've had a lot of community input. And this is asking for more community input, and I don't see a problem with it. I honestly wish, we're talking about $12,000 here. I honestly wish he spent as much time talking about things which are costing a couple of million as opposed to 12,000. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I'm not sure where we're going here. What I'm kind of thinking is, for sure, I think we need to do this the farm outreach to the farmers. We can't really go forward with agricultural policy without doing that. So to me, that's something that has to happen, and it's pretty much touches on many electoral areas. And then, other than that, there are individual ones that you may decide that you really think are important to do, but could we have a sort of a time boundedness on that so that the money, so if it doesn't happen by September, then Sierra can access it for her community meetings?
To the chair, you could pass in the motion that unexpended funds by such and such date would revert back into the community information budget.
Would that make sense? Would that appease people, or, I don't know. Help me here, folks. Director Segal.
I guess I'm just thinking about what Ms. Cheryl said. And so is this about getting money, set aside for one meeting for each area? Or is this actually around the boundary of not overtaxing staff time and limiting one director, one meeting that accesses strategic planning a year or something?
Through the chair to the director, Director Segal. So it's both. And again, we're trying to limit runaway scope. I mean, there's a lot here, but also accommodate. We don't have a lot of requests right now. We have 3. So seniors, business community, and then electoral area-wide agriculture. But we have, in some instances, sometimes had requests from an electoral area, 10 meetings. So it's about limiting that and the fairness of that. In the case of the most recent meeting that we had, as I said, there was 0 costs. But we have been advised through our CFO that we do need to have a figure and set it aside. Probably our experience would be that most often the rental space is given to us. Someone in the community brings coffee. So it's usually a nominal cost, if anything, but we do have to have a dollar figure there. It doesn't have to be 500, yes.
Yeah. Director Morrison?
Thank you. It's a great theory and principle to engage community. I'm still stuck on the fact that this was never the intent of the funds that are being allocated here, at least not in my mind. So I'm vacillating back and forth in the fact that an individual director who wants to do this can go ahead and access the funds. There's no board requirement, from my understanding. This is put there for that very reason. And if staff are requested to do 8 meetings in one electoral area, it's going to come back and be discussed by, well, I guess because it's financial, it would be the board. Maybe not. I don't need an answer on that, but I think that this is getting very complicated. I don't know that I would be engaging for a meeting such as this if it sounds like we've got 2 or 3. And I'm going to raise one other issue. We all think that this is, we're going to go out and engage community. I went to all of those local area plan meetings, and there were some folks that caught on to what was going on, and they were at every single meeting. And how are we limiting the access to these meetings to private gatherings of limited numbers? I'm not talking about the agricultural one, but I'm just feeling this is like in the bad idea file, unless it's done on a very limited basis or done through a public process that's available through our APC meetings. I'll leave it at that.
Would staff care to comment? No?
The only comment I'd like to add to it is the reason why rationale is to ensure if there's money and the directors wish to partake, they let us know so we can put them funds aside, because it is not actually being tracked by director. So if one director in case wanted 8 meetings and they cost, say, 500 apiece, they'd be utilizing that fund very quickly at this point in time. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention.
So there is enough money in this thing to cover off whatever you need to have done in your area, plus the agricultural plan. And so the issue is, I think we'll just go with the recommendation. Would anyone care to move it? It's moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Okay. Director Mortman.
Thank you. I thought we were going to put a time limit on it.
You can make, you can,
So I'd like to put a time limit of September 30th.
on the, that would be an amendment?
Yep.
Seconded? Okay, it's been seconded on the amendment to September 30th.
So for clarity, this is for those who want a special meeting, and we're gonna say, yes, we want one to stop the scope.
The, if the, can I speak right now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, through the chair to Director Atkins. So this would be for those directors that ask staff to convene a meeting with a special group, but it's not required.
So you can convene one meeting in addition to the agriculture, but you have to let Ms. Breen know before September 30th. That's the intent of this amendment. And Ms. Weiner.
I just wanted to say, but all of the funds will be held until September 30th. This is holding up all of those funds, so.
That's right. Do we know how much is in the, how much we've used so far?
So far, $100 has been expended, so it's $26,900 right now, so.
This is a big issue, as Director Wilson's pointed out. All right, so on the amendment. Director McClinton, you're dying to say something. Okay, on the amendment, all in favor? Anyone opposed? 2 people are opposed. Director, 3, 4 people are opposed. Morrison, Deck, Acton, and McClinton. Okay? So any more discussion on the motion as amended? Would you like to read it as amended? It's kind of long.
So the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that special focus group meetings requested by electoral area directors be accommodated subject to 1, available staff resources, 2, available funds in function 250 community information to offset meeting and related expenses, 3, that attendance at special focus group meetings be limited to 15 people for electoral area meetings and 50 people for meetings of all electoral areas. 4, that the number of special focus group meetings be limited to 1 per electoral area and 1 for all electoral areas per annum, unless the board authorizes that this number be exceeded by a 2/3 vote of electoral area directors, and that a time limit on expenditure of the funds be September 30th.
Okay, can I call Director Morrison?
So I'm not a firm believer in precedent, but I really don't want staff coming back to this function for another kick at the can in a year's time. So can we put September 30th, 2023 on this? And fair warning, I don't want to see something like this again. I don't know if the other directors do, but this is kind of a hands-off. Thanks.
Director McClinton.
You know, just kind of listening and hearing in, I won't be supporting the motion. I don't think that this is what the funds is meant for. I think we're all adults and that we can manage our time and budget appropriately, and I don't think we need a motion to do this. I won't be supporting it.
Any more discussion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 people opposed. Did you get those? Morrison, Morrison, Acton, Segal, and McClinton. Director Deck, you were. Yeah, no, I'm not. You're opposed as well? No, I'm not. You're not opposed? Okay. You're in favor? The motion's carried then. Thank heavens. All right, thank you. Moving on to R8. Do we need a break? This is going to be a long one. Okay, a quick break, 5 minutes. Welcome back. We're going to do our 10 now because we have a person from Ministry of Transportation here, and we don't want to hold them up. So welcome.
Sorry, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Megan Walker, Parks and Trails Planner. I did have a presentation to go with this, but I don't see our presentation person here, so I'm just going to give a quick overview verbally. This is for item R10. Yes, we've moved this up on the agenda because we have a representative here from the ministry who's available for questions, and he does need to leave shortly. So the item before you is item R10, request for installation of Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure roadworks within Briarwood Park, Electoral Area A. So just as a brief overview to introduce this, storm events in November 2021 resulted in the washout of a Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure triple culvert system and roadway where Hollings Creek passes under Briarwood Drive adjacent to Briarwood Park in Electoral Area A. The ministry quickly restored the only vehicular access to the approximately 70 residential properties to the east, utilizing a temporary portable bridge. The ministry has developed a permanent clear span bridge design as a more ecologically beneficial and climate change resilient option to a replacement of the culvert roadway system. However, the design will require utilization of portions of the adjacent Briarwood Park to allow for both temporary construction access and thereafter the installation and maintenance of permanent riprap required to protect the bridge abutments from scour. The ministry is requesting CVRD board approvals for these uses of Briarwood Park. Portions of two parcels of Briarwood Park would be affected, requiring separate agreements. Multiple agreements would be required. A license of occupation for construction access would allow for temporary construction access, referring to the slide that is not here. Once construction is complete, the final riprap area will be surveyed and a separate agreement for each park parcel will address ongoing maintenance responsibilities. There is a possibility that additional separate agreements would need to be made between BC Hydro and the CVRD if aerial trespass over the park parcels becomes required in association with this project. The current design does not require this, but board approval is being requested at this time in the case that site conditions during construction require minor design revisions that would involve BC Hydro use of Briarwood Park. To avoid any related delays towards completion of this project during the summer's least risk to fish construction period and before next winter's storms. The staff recommended resolutions to enable the project to proceed are before you. Happy to address any questions you may have. Stuart Johnson is here from the ministry to address any questions for the ministry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Director Segal?
Thank you. Yeah, I have questions for the Ministry of Transportation rep. Sorry, what was Stuart? Yep. Hi. So I have two questions. The first is if pedestrians and cyclists will be, how will they get to use the bridge? Yeah.
Currently, I think the roadway is about roughly, we have 3-meter lanes, and we try not to vary too much from the ambient standard. You typically don't want to build like a monument in the middle of a roadway, so we find that's confusing to pedestrians. So right now it's very low vehicle traffic. So pedestrians are accommodated because we'll have a slightly wider shoulder than the existing roadway, and the lanes are going to be slightly wider on the approaches.
Great. And my second question is if you would be available to have a site visit with my community Parks Commission, to just to understand the scope of work and how it's going to affect the park.
Yep, anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Turn to the director of the area.
So I would like to move the motion, but also add an additional number, that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure be requested to organize a site visit for the Electoral Area A Community Parks Advisory Commission to provide an overview of the Briarwood Road Bridge Replacement Project.
And it's been seconded. And would you like to read the other part of the recommendation? Please.
Sure. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, one, that CVRD enter into a license of occupation for construction access with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to allow temporary access within portions of Briarwood Park associated with installation of a new bridge over Hollings Creek on Briarwood Drive. Two, that a statutory right-of-way be registered in favor of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure over a portion of the Briarwood Park legally described as PID 003446913, Lot 1, Section 1, Range 7, Shawnigan District, for installation and maintenance of riprap works on Hollings Creek. 3, that unregistered license of use agreement between the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and the CVRD for a portion of Briarwood Park legally described as Park, Section 1, Range 7, Shawnigan District, and District Lot 17, Malahat District, Plan 22884 for installation and maintenance of riprap works on Hollings Creek. 4, that the CVRD enter into aerial trespass agreements, statutory right-of-way and unregistered agreement with BC Hydro to allow for installation and maintenance works for portions of Briarwood Park, legally described as PID 003446913, Lot 1, Section 1, Range 7, Shawnigan District, and Park, Section 1, Range 7, Shawnigan District, and District Lot 17, Malahat District, Plan 22884. And 5, that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure be requested to organize a site visit for the Electoral A Community Parks Advisory Commission to provide an overview of Briarwood Road Bridge Replacement Project.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Discussion. I'm sure I heard Director Segal say that a site visit be organized, including the Area AAPC and the Ministry of Transportation, or the parks. I don't think any motion we have can compel the Ministry of Transportation to organize a site visit. Does that sound about right?
I think the motion had a request in it, didn't it not?
That's what was suggested
Yes.
to be the motion, but you think it should be that the
A site
CVRD?
visit be organized, including, you can't request the province to organize a site visit for us. In
Okay.
one of our motions, is my understanding.
Well, I think staff advised Director Segal on the wording of that, so.
Ask Mr. Farquhar.
Is it particularly
Wow,
problematic?
things are different.
I think the intention is understood. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Well, we're back to our 8. Thank you for coming.
Okay, R8 is a report from the General Manager, Land Use Services Department, Redevelopment Services Modernization Service Enhancement Plan. And this is for information.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. This was what was becoming an extremely lengthy report, so it became 2 reports. The first is an information report, an update on the Development Services Modernization Project, which we commenced in 2020, following the completion of a service review of the Development Services Division. And so attachment A to the staff report outlines the initiatives that rolled out of the service review, and sort of want to touch on some of the highlights of that, some of the significant accomplishments, including namely the acquisition of funding from the Union of BC Municipalities, the amount of $500,000 to support the implementation of a land management system. So we're actually nearing the final stages of procuring a software as a service vendor. We'll be coming back to you in the near future to provide more details on the rollout of that program, but it's pretty exciting stuff for an organization that's been very focused on some very rudimentary tools for land management for a very long time. We've also, you've also supported us hiring a full-time environmental planner. So we are in again, the final stages of getting a job description approved through our HR and our local union. And once that's done, we'll be able to post for that position to help and hopefully hire a successful person to help us with both environmental planning, development matters, and bylaw enforcement. We spent a lot of time working on the sort of the cultural component and people, more focus on both internally and externally with the public. So dedicating full-time resources to our front counter and to our website. Building on the Plan Your Cowichan platform, developing a realtor portal. I want to mention that we get a significant number of requests for information from realtors, and we do our best to accommodate them, but it is significant. But obviously an important part of the work we do. Continue to support professional development of staff. We've actually always, the CVRD's always done that. So continue to do that even through the pandemic when, you know, folks weren't able to attend conferences or courses in person. We sort of transitioned to doing that more online and are finding that some of our staff actually prefer that now. Some like to get out and meet people in person, and some like the option to be able to, you know, stay closer to home and take online courses. We've been meeting regularly with provincial agencies and others to improve coordination of our processes. So things like how we deal with water licensing and our subdivision, the subdivision approval process, which of course is ultimately with the province. More work coming on that. There's been a lot of work on internal policy and procedures. So introducing a new development application procedures bylaw. In 2021, new APC bylaw, new Board of Variance bylaw, new development application referrals policy, new checklists, forms, continued pre-application meetings with developers, coordination of review with other divisions like water management and public safety, emergency management. We introduced internally a staff legal services procedure to ensure that we're, you know, being financially responsible when we're obtaining legal services in relation to development applications and our project work. And a number of regulations and policies have been updated. So, I mean, the biggest one that's got to be noted there is the harmonized official community plan for the electoral areas. Our electoral area works and services bylaw, which was formerly called the, I believe it was called the subdivision bylaw. But again, we can control works and services, not necessarily subdivision. So a bit of a name change. Manufactured home park bylaw, new floodplain management bylaws, cannabis policy, manufactured home park redevelopment policy. I'm sorry I'm reading through this, but I'm actually incredibly proud of the work that our department has done on these things. Telecommunications antenna structure policy. And then on the public-facing side, some changes in terms of public hearings. So you have the ability to formally request community information meetings in advance of public hearings. Looking at advisory planning commission referrals and shifting the focus of the APCs to those applications that are really discretionary in nature. So major variance applications, major zoning bylaw amendment applications, as opposed to the ones that are technical in nature, like development permits, where if they meet the guidelines, they're entitled to the permit. So, and then providing continued support for commissions. So and that is both through orientation and training around managing meetings and understanding conflict of interest and procedural fairness, but also providing greater staff support with both recording meetings where, APCs don't have dedicated secretary who's been appointed, but also being there to provide information about applications that are being presented. So the 2023-2025 Service Enhancement Plan, which is attachment B to my report, outlines the proposed work plan for the next couple of years. And this will be refined following the outcomes of the board's strategic planning process. We're really looking for further refinement of some of the things I've noted already. Development application procedures, looking more at our referrals policy. We have a number of bylaws and policies that are really out of date that we need to get to that may be dealt with either on a standalone basis or as part of the comprehensive land use bylaw. So parking bylaw, sign bylaw, campsite standards, and then again looking at some of the things that we've dealt with not too far in the distant past, but need review. Things like our natural hazard risk tolerance policy. So that was 2019. We've now been working with that for 4 years, but it's time to sort of check in and make sure that the policy is doing what we want it to be doing. Reviewing our development permit area guidelines. So those are the guidelines that were introduced with the harmonized OCP. Finding some opportunities to strengthen guidelines in certain cases, and also to maybe streamline them as well, so we're not putting an undue burden on some of our applicants for things that are really straightforward. Again, reviewing our works and services bylaw. So what you have is a bylaw that's largely complete, but needs some work, mostly on the engineering side with respect to new systems that might be coming on stream, but also greater consideration of significant issues like drainage and stormwater management. Community amenity contribution policy, we'll be coming back to you with a report on that, and that's a bit up in the air because the province is maybe looking at legislation to change community amenity contribution frameworks that local governments use today. And then potentially a couch and lake flood management bylaw. And again, that needs to follow work that's occurring in the region already around the Weir. And then I've noted a number of areas where we could have further discussion. That would be around public hearings, advisory commissions, and communications engagement. Those are kind of 3 areas that stick out for me. And I won't kind of go into too much detail on, you've all read the report, I'm sure. And at this point, I can take questions, or I could go right into the next report. Whatever your pleasure.
So let's do questions, and I want to make sure that everyone feels that they have enough information to do the next report and make the decisions on those things. So, Director Martman?
Thank you. And I just, was reflecting on what I heard earlier from the gallery during public input, and wondering if you have thoughts about how we can improve the timing of information that goes out to the public and when a meeting occurs. And whether it fits within this umbrella or is another area of responsibility.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Martman, I think that's a really good question, and it's always a bit of an internal push-pull. There's tremendous, with the meetings being held on a bi-weekly basis, and Jennifer will tell you, she's sitting back there, she's the one that's responsible for, compiling our agendas and getting them out, and it's constant, right? So we're in this constant cycle, and I think would be very challenging to get the agenda out more than 5 days in advance of the meeting like we have been doing. Having said that, with the introduction of a land management system, it should become much easier for members of the public to go onto the CBRD website and into the land management platform and to be able to find information about the applications within their areas. And when I say that, I anticipate they'll be able to find fairly detailed information about the applications. I mean, information that's that can be shared publicly, of course, but detailed information about the status of the application and when it might be coming to a committee meeting. So that should help. And of course, there'll be a whole rollout of that process. And you know, if you've been involved in any kind of information technology, which I know some directors have, systems development, it's very highly detailed, and there's opportunities to kind of build in those types of things and checks and balances into the system. But a citizen portal is intended to be a key aspect of that program. Yeah.
Director McClinton.
Excuse me, through the chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. I managed to read through most of it. The one that really jumped out at me, and I think it's just, you know, my nature to, or I've had the opportunity to be involved with it, but the public hearings and just moving them entirely online. You know, in theory, I support the idea, but, you know, I think it's extremely challenging for the public to access those hearings. You know, unless we can come up with a much simpler solution for people to be able to log on and access those public hearings, you know, I might look to something a little bit more of a hybrid approach still. I think there's some folks that, well, I was going to say older folks, but I mean, everybody's got different varying degrees of technological ability, so that's something that just concerns me a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
I think that was raised by someone in public input as well. Is it possible to have for people to participate if they don't have computers?
So there are recommendations on public hearings in the in the next report, and the first one is that the default be that an electronic hearing be held unless the CBRD is unable to host the hearing electronically, or the director for the area specifically requests that the hearing be held in person. There have, the meetings have been held electronically. There have been a couple situations where we have had people in the boardroom, and it is a bit challenging. I would defer to the directors who have perhaps chaired those hearings to get their feedback on to what extent that can be successful. I mean, ideally, you would have the ability in any electronic meeting to also have that be a hybrid meeting where people could also come. But that really needs to be a discussion, I think, amongst the directors, and specifically the directors who are asked to chair those meetings, because it can be challenging. I will say that we've had, I should have done a tally of the number of electronic hearings that we have had over the last couple of years. It's been fairly significant. And I will say, for the most part, with the exception of some, you know, minor technical challenges from time to time, they've been quite effective in terms of being able to run a hearing that is equitable in terms of how people access and are able to participate in the hearing. There isn't, you know, we don't have the same situation as you do sometimes in an in-person hearing. If you've ever been to an ugly in-person public hearing, you'll know it can be quite painful. And really, the electronic format does become a bit of an equalizer because you don't see people. There isn't a body language component, which can in some cases be quite threatening. So you get, people have the opportunity to speak, but they don't have necessarily the opportunity to gesture. And that is becoming a fairly big concern in, you know, the public forum. So it is something to consider. But yeah, I would have to provide more information in consultation with our IT experts to see, you know, how feasible it is to, you know, guarantee that meetings could be held in a hybrid format, but might turn it back to the directors who chair the meetings.
just a comment, you're right, I have never participated in a public hearing that was in person, so I can't speak to those other challenges. So, yeah, thanks for the input.
Okay. Director Deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if the number of public hearings has gone down, the attendance rather has gone down. I know every public hearing is different, but I'm just wondering on the whole, if you've seen less attendance, more attendance, what's your?
Through you, Madam Chair, I really did, I think it really depends on the subject matter. So if it's a controversial hearing, it will be well attended regardless of whether it's in person or online. We've had some public hearings that have literally lasted 2 minutes or less. And cases where we've convened public hearings and we've had no comments other than, the statutory comments that need to be made at the introduction of the meeting and the comments that are made by the staff. And then the requisite calling for 3 times for comments before the hearing is closed, right? So it really depends. I'll also say that the legislation, I think it was noted in this report, or perhaps the next one, the legislation was sort of changed a bit. It really didn't change the authority that local governments had to waive public hearings, but it changed the language to where local governments have the option to not hold or decide not to hold public hearings. And I think it was almost like the provincial government wanted to encourage local governments to not hold public hearings if you don't feel that the matter is controversial, or if the proposal before you is really complementary to your official community plan. Because there is always the opportunity to simply not hold a public hearing, hold a public information meeting, and then you can still get information up until the time you've adopted a bylaw, right?
Anyone else? Director Acton.
Madam Chair, interruption. I thought you'd already acknowledged me to speak after Director McClinton.
Sorry, I forgot, Director
I thought
Wilson.
you might have done. Can I go ahead?
You may.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Director Acton.
The land management system. I had an interesting conversation with one of your staff in the car park earlier on today, and I think from what I can make out, the staff are really looking forward to this. I'm glad it's going ahead. I'm glad you've got pots of money from the government. And one of the questions that I did ask, and I think the staff member I talked to wasn't quite too sure about it, was with this platform, you are able to bring in the GIS layers as well?
So the platform, one of the requirements is that the platform is integrated with our geographic information system. So it is entirely map-based.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 questions. I hope you can tell me if I can ask this one, because you mentioned staff. So this is a general question. I guess I'm wondering, now that COVID's over and we've talked about it a couple times, but how is the working from home going, and are we doing desk sharing?
I think I would defer to Barbara Mohan on that particular question, and I'm not sure, Barbara, would you feel okay? She's the expert on that particular.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through the Director Acton. The work from home policy is currently under review because we had a policy that we implemented just toward we're kind of right in the middle of COVID, actually. And now that we've been working with it for a while, we want to make some adjustments. But on the whole, the policy is working, and we do have a large complement of staff mostly working a hybrid work week. We don't have very many staff that work 100% from home. In situations where people have a hybrid work week, and you'll be hearing more about this soon, the approach that we've taken in the workplace is to try to move towards a system where employees who have a hybrid workspace are sharing space with employees that have a complementary schedule. And that space might be smaller than a space that 2 people would occupy full-time. but they are not desk sharing. And part of that has to do with the fact that at any given time, we need to be able to accommodate everybody in the building. Because we don't require people to work from home. So if we required people to work from home, there would be a whole other level of obligation and administration around this. And so because the work from home program remains voluntary, the employees make a bit of a trade-off in terms of what they might get at work, but everybody has a designated workstation. So.
And my second question, and maybe this is kind of the whole building too. I'm wondering if the phone system has been improved in all your long list of improvements, because it's really, I can't remember if we even funded anything, because it's so challenging to try and get through and get to somebody you want to talk to.
So I would, again, defer to Barbara on that, but I'm wondering if you even want to come back to a future meeting on.
Yeah, I think I'm probably, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, to Director Acton. So there's sort of two aspects of your question. One is sort of the technological aspect and the contract that goes along with our phone system. And so that, we're on a cycle, and I'm not sure where we are in that cycle. I could come back and let you know in terms of renewing our contracts and what the next iteration of our phone system is. And then the other piece is that the phone is a highly programmable system, right? And so there's always opportunities to learn about how we can improve the current programming on the phones in terms of how it redirects calls or what information it gives to people automatically and what kind of menu choices they have. So if you have feedback from constituents or your own feedback around the phone system, I encourage you to forward it to myself, and I will follow up and see if there's things we can do to improve the management of the phone system. The contract part of the phone system is something I'd have to come back and report on if you were interested. So.
Okay, thank you. I got a last question, but it is land use services focused.
Director, we're focused on the development services report, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we did this initial report, a lot of conversation was made about silos and the being able to work with other departments and through either even working side by side and all that. So can you describe some of the improvements in that area?
So through you, Madam Chair, I think that the most significant one is that we've got a development review team that coordinates with between development services, water management, environmental services on applications. We have even under our current policy, our referrals policy, where we're not necessarily referring things out to agencies before they come here, we are doing internal referrals before we come here so that we've had that initial conversation. There's certainly more work that we need to do. So Mr. Postings and I have talked about water management and, for instance, the process of people coming into service areas, right, has historically been done through the operations department, but really there's a critical sort of planning focus to that. So we're working on a new integrated process for those types of requests. So we're continuing to try to not have a siloed approach. I mean, it is really difficult in a regional district where you're really driven by discrete budgets, right? But we're doing our best to get around that.
Director Morrison's next, then Director Martman.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the discussion around the public hearing process and the public information process. And just speaking personally on observations over the last couple of years, I think it's high time we get back to an in-person engagement with individuals who choose to participate in that format. There's been I agree with Ms. Jarlf's assessment that it's really kind of hard to say whether attendance has gone up or down on the basis of the subject matter of the rezoning. But I can tell you that there are some folks that struggle with the electronic format. It has, I think, made for some cleaner type of public hearings, but we've had I think on a couple of occasions, individuals who have attended here, which that presents a whole bunch of problems that folks wouldn't even think about. Like, we would have to have a commissioner in the building. We would have to be concerned about the safety of our employees that are in attendance in the boardroom. So there's a number of other factors where we've probably had some cost savings by going to an electronic format. I think it's time that we get back to at least a hybrid format where if people want to attend their seat of government to be at a meeting or whether it be in one of our communities, that it should probably happen. But I don't think we can do a hybrid format anywhere but in this room. So important aspects, I think we need to get community back involved in an in-person format, and would encourage staff to look at that. But we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it in the budget because there's increased costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martman.
Just to go back to silos, I think other organizations get into what's called cross-pollination. And I'm wondering if there's something that is, any thought being given to that, where you actually, you know, I think it's self-explanatory, but you actually move people into positions on a temporary basis, you know, so they really get immersed and learn about another portion of the I'm getting a smile.
I'm looking at the HR expert. Yeah, I will say, so we have had, we've had staff in our department who've gone and worked in other, you know, in other divisions, in multiple other divisions, and come back. And we've had staff within the organization who've moved through different positions, and I think that's always encouraged because you always learn something new and you try something new, right? So that is certainly encouraged within the organization from what I have seen. There is going to be an organizational assessment, and my understanding is that our CAO will be soliciting input from the directors on that assessment, and so there's an opportunity to perhaps shape some of the questions that are asked. Did either of you want to add more to that? Or does that make sense?
It does. I don't think
Okay.
it's a new concept,
Okay.
and I think there's always barriers and problems, but the outcome of it is often very significant for organizations. I just want to circle back, you know, the idea of the citizens portal, getting current information on files, but I think, you know, I don't know how other regional districts do it, or if there's insight from comparing what best practices would be between time of public distribution of materials and time of meetings. And I'd be interested to see that, what others might be doing. You know, even if we're holding our meetings on a different day and the meeting material still comes out on Friday, you know, just, I would like to, if somehow, broaden that gap, you know, if it's something that could be done. I think I hear that from over and over from my area.
So through you, Madam Chair, I would suggest that might be a really good topic of conversation for the governance committee, because it wouldn't only apply to electoral area services, but to the other committee and board meeting for that matter.
Any more? Director Morrison.
Thank you. Specifically to advisory commissions, and I read some tightening up of some of the rationale for the referrals and the nature of what will be asked as far as the advice from advisory commissions, and I'm somewhat heartened by those. But I'm looking at the recommended technical advisory panel, and you know, I'm unconvinced at this point that, you know, we assemble a group of, you know, I don't know whether it would be along the lines of an APC, you know, 8, 10, 12, 15 people, and that they be a review panel for the more technical aspects of what might be referred to them. You know, I look to staff to be our technical experts, and as I say, I'm unconvinced, and I think that it's suggesting further discussion. Has this idea been advanced with staff any further?
Through you, Madam Chair, it actually hasn't. I would say that it was a recommendation of the consultant that did the service review. It is a fairly urban construct to have this type of a panel, and so that's not to say that it couldn't have application in the electoral area context, but it is, you know, very different in urban areas when you're dealing with major high-rise buildings, significant urban design, transportation-related matters, et cetera. And yes, we do, you know, we do have significant staff expertise and expertise within other divisions that we rely on, and we'll rely on professionals and outside agencies for technical advice. So it is, so we are getting technical advice. It's not that we're not getting it. And as I've noted, we do have several existing advisory commissions that we rely on for their you know, unique knowledge of the local communities, which is extremely helpful. And we're certainly not looking to add to the number of commissions to administer, because it does take a considerable amount of time. It's valuable, but it does take a considerable amount of time.
So we've been on this journey of trying to improve development services for a few years, and I think we've made some great strides. We have another report about making some changes, and I think that I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering if we could bump that till next meeting so people could read it again based on what you've heard and talk about today, and then I think we'll be in a better position to make some good decisions on that. And then we can finish up with the quick other two reports, and then we have a quick closed session, I believe. So does that make sense to everyone? So this one was for information, and we can even do more discussion or more questions next time. All right?
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Ms. Cheryl. All right, so we'll jump down to R11.
Do you want a motion to refer that to the next meeting?
If we need a motion to do that, we will. Could I have a motion to refer that? And it's been seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Welcome, Mr. Harris.
Good afternoon, directors. My name is Rob Harris, and I'm here for questions.
Questions on bylaw enforcement, first quarter report? Director Atkin.
Mr. Harris, Constable Harris, do I say constable? Officer? I always find these reports so hard. Maybe if last year's numbers were there, or like, because you kind of have nothing to relate it to. But could I have clarity on, so for example, there's only 40, how many were at the bottom here? 66 complaints. And let's say somebody, and there was 3 soil bylaw ones in area B. So let's say I just call and I'm like, this guy's dumping, da 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 da. And you go, no, calm down. Calm down, Sierra. This guy has a permit. It's all good. Does that go on there? Or is that just counted as the like 10 phone calls a day?
It sort of depends on each situation whether we capture it. Generally, it will be a call for service where we're out on site to verify what we need to verify. Phone calls, you know, general queries, things like that, that we can kind of resolve on the phone or look at the information right there and know that everything should be okay. Well, is not recorded in those complaints. So generally, it's a call for service where we're on site somewhere. Yeah.
Okay. Director Martin.
Thank you, and I'm shocked to see 3 in Area H. I'll work on that. Keep them distracted on other things, right? No, I didn't say that. Animal control. I think usually you report something from them.
Actually, yeah, we typically will include a monthly report, kind of stat thing. But generally, when we capture animal control, it's as a result of us assisting our contractor. So that's where you don't see those numbers through this first quarter, is we have not provided the assistance that we have in the past as a need-only basis. So.
And so, but there's also some reporting sometimes, I think, on ticketing that they do. And,
Yeah, absolutely, and that's generally captured in that animal control category as well. So that's essentially us trying to collect, where the tickets are handed to us, and then we follow through to make sure that's collected upon, to send that message. But if you're not seeing much in the animal control or the dog control, it means it's going pretty good as far as us not having to provide assistance. So.
Yeah, I think it's just an area B right now, so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Morrison.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just looking at the complaint file breakdown by area chart, and I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but there's an awful lot of reading to do with this agenda. Are we looking at, in the zoning category, is that where we would have complaints about short-term rental activities and the likes? And I'll wait for your answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, so anything that may be contrary to our zoning regulations, so short-term rentals. I think I've summarized the majority of zoning complaints as, again, non-compliant dwelling situations is by far the majority of the calls here, which are, as we know, short-term rentals, illegal suites, living in RVs, that type of call.
As a follow-up, I was at I think it was the LGLA event, and another elected official had who I was speaking with has relatives living in the Cowichan Lake area, and seems to think that every second property out there is in a short-term rental scenario. You know, it's anecdotal, but I'm wondering how difficult it would be for staff to break out and identify singularly the short-term rental offenses that are being investigated. I think that given that we're in a housing crisis and people are being evicted from homes for long-term rental on a fairly regular basis, that that would be a very important stat to, I know, myself and maybe other directors as well.
I will make a note of that, and we will make it happen.
Other questions? Director Abbott.
Just of interest, earlier we heard about Laketown Ranch and bylaw enforcement. Your staff aren't allowed to just drop in on Laketown and see if bylaws are being followed?
We are, as long as it's during reasonable hours. So that's typically 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. We have that right to go onto the property unless there's some sort of agreement with the owner to access the property outside of those hours.
If I may, Chair. But checking on private properties as to short-term rentals, you can't come onto our properties?
We can enter any property to ascertain if they're adhering to the bylaws. Of course, we want, you know, our attendance has to be warranted. We have to have some sort of information that may lead us to believe that there's a violation or something contrary. So we won't just walk onto somebody's property with no reason to and just start looking around. If we have some information where there may be a violation, then we're authorized to enter the property. Yeah.
Director Eck?
Yeah, I didn't want to ask this, but I have to. What's under OCP?
OCP is the typical development permit area violations. So that's unauthorized or unpermitted works in development permit areas. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we've got R12, building inspection report. Welcome.
Good evening, directors. Thank you, Chair. Sonny Brisky. I'm also here for questions.
Great.
What's your secret? My community loves you.
Well, through the chair to you, Director Acton, I love your community as well.
I do. That's all I hear. I mean, all I hear is how great Sunny is. Like, I hear more positive things about you than anybody in the whole CBRD combined, for sure. So you have a secret sauce that nobody else does.
I appreciate that. We try our best to maintain a high level of customer service, so thank you.
Director Wilson and Director Morrison.
Yeah,
And
thank you,
Director
Madam
Hart?
Chair. I think that partially the answer to Director Acton's question, I hear the same things in my community as well, is the fact that Mr. Brewski,
That's correct.
actually says, what can we do as opposed to what can't we do? So thank you for that.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, and it thrills me like you wouldn't believe to be in 5th place for value out of 9 electoral areas at this stage. It won't last long, but I just want to ask briefly about the regulation, and I'm not going to get into any specifics, but the regulation that allows for RV occupation during the construction of a principal residence. Is it, am I correct in the assumption that you can occupy an RV as your residence while under construction for a year and another, and a renewal for a second year? Or do you have that information at hand, or do we need to talk offline?
Through the chair to Director Morrison, I believe we have that provision in a number of our zoning bylaws. Some of them are slightly different than others. At the tip of my tongue, I would suggest that it is for a year maximum, and that comes with a bond and a covenant for removal if adherence with that regulation is not met. And a valid building permit must be issued as well in conjunction with that. So I can clarify for you and follow up if you'd like.
Director McClinton.
Through the chair,
If you'll indulge me, Madam Chair, I just wanted to follow up on the comment, just to confirm that not all of our zoning bylaws allow temporary occupancy of RVs. So, but that is something that we'll be coming back to you with further discussion on, because it also relates to temporary use permits. So there'll be more on that.
what if it's really nice? Just easy. Do you think you're getting all the love because you're from Area G? Is that possibly, no?
You know it.
Just curious, 27 permits of new single-family dwellings, looks like it's generating some good revenue. Just maybe speak to historical trends, how things are going in that sense, and yeah, if you could just talk about that number a little bit.
Absolutely. Through the chair to Director McClinton. I think certainly our region of Vancouver Island is a little bit of a bubble. We're probably likely to see some of the effects of, what's happening in other parts of the country right now. But there is a lot of demand for housing. Unfortunately, we don't always have some of the available building lots that maybe some of the member municipalities have. Water's a big issue. We've, hit that pretty hard today already. So, things are a little down, but that being said, we got a number of new regulations, and I think a lot of folks may be a little bit nervous about making an investment, but these things usually go in cycles. So as the cost of materials and the timeline to obtain materials kind of gets back to normal, I think we'll see things rise again. Everybody wants to be here. You can win a trip to Tofino or Port Renfrew on Wheel of Fortune, so I mean the secret's out. So
It is.
Director Martman.
Giving it away.
So one is a very high level question, and I think it has to come through what's coming down through the province, and that is about the idea of more density. And how do you see the building inspection department prepared or able to respond to changes that may come in the next 6 months or whatever they come up with legislation?
through the chair to Director Martman, I think, yeah, I've been getting a lot of questions about that. And I think, one thing that, we got to be cognizant of is that, existing health regulations still apply. So, perhaps in the town of Ladysmith or in the district of North Cowichan where water and sewer and things like that are available, it would be, fire service, all these things, it might be a little bit more realistic. But whereas, in our region, if I was going to put, 4 units on rural property in Area G, perhaps, then I might be looking at a $100,000 septic field that takes up my entire backyard and butts up against my neighbor's wells, right? So that legislation may come, but, there's some fine print that goes with it as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any unfinished business?
No unfinished, no unfinished business, no new business, and then we have question period.
Question period. Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Madam Chair, on R7, I don't think we should have any restrictions on the input from the public for OCP meetings. The OCP document was supposed to be the public's document, and to reduce the public or restrict the public for a few dollars, I think is not the right thing to do. Can we have open OCP meetings so that the public can attend and express their wishes?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. We have had many open OCP meetings. I think it's just making sure we've picked up on some of the special interest groups that have related to particular policies that we're talking about. And certainly when the local area planning process gets underway, there will be plenty of opportunity for the public to participate in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? All right, then we need a motion to move into closed session. And it's seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. So let's just do 5 minutes because people probably want to get home, and then we can have our